All right, folks. Well, it's officially MaREC Madness. I don't know if you've heard, but I'm Jim Reed. I've got the best freaking job in the world. And tonight I am joined by the one and only Ryan Laplante. Ryan, thanks so much for coming in and getting in the booth with me for Rec Poker's MaREC Madness.
Well, thanks for having me. I always really enjoy doing commentary, and we did this before about 2 years ago or so. I had a lot of fun doing it. Also, I always really enjoy things like brackets and tournaments and all that type of stuff. And I'm curious to see how people are going to play. If anyone's been practicing at all, see who's on top of their game for this heads up.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. So we've got two matches tonight. This is the semifinal round of our MaREC Madness. But people might be familiar with the NCAA March Madness that they totally stole from us. We call it MaREC Madness, and we've been doing it for a while. It's a lot of fun. So we started off with 16. We're down to the final four. Again, so a term that we coined. The first match is going to be Eric Jin versus Ben Enslow. Eric Jin is the facilitator of our Play, Explain, and Learn sessions on
Yeah,
every other
that's it.
Thursday, which is a
That's a name I
fantastic.
recognize.
Yeah, there you go. I was gonna say I knew that one would stand out to you. And Ben Enslow is a popular streamer, and he's streaming every Sunday, starting at 9 a.m. Actually, on this YouTube channel here on the Rec Poker YouTube channel. So I'm excited to see more of these two. And our second match is actually also a streamer versus one of our study coaches. It's Scott Beckham, who goes by DFS Brad, who has several streams on
Oh, yep,
Twitch. You know what I'm talking
yep,
about, right?
of course.
Versus Rob Washam, who's one of the OGs here at Rec Poker and runs our book club, our book study, and he offers some coaching as well. So it's kind of the streamers versus the study coaches, four excellent players, and I'm also really excited to see how these two approach each other. Now, Ryan, you're obviously much more versed in heads up play than a lot of our premium members and a lot of the folks in the audience today.
Yep,
You've made a lot of that training material available through your fantastic site, Learn Pro
of course.
Poker, which was our first learning partner and a big part of what we've done here at Rec Poker. And you've also got this new platform, the school platform. You're working with this fantastic solver Octopi. Why don't you just tell us a
Yep.
little bit about all this cool stuff you got going on?
So school's an entirely free platform. It's kind of set up like the community section's kind of set up like a Facebook feed. You can filter by topic and all that type of stuff. We're coming pretty close up on 3,000 members, so
Wow.
pretty decent sized community. I also give rewards for anyone that posts and gets interactions. So if you make a post and someone likes it, we you get a point, and we have a leaderboard where the monthly winner gets a one-on-one coaching session with me. Everyone in the top 10 gets a free group coaching session. Then we give away 3 months of 1 month each of premium to the top three. So we're giving away a lot of value entirely for free in the school community. And then besides for school, of course, we have Learn Pro Poker, fully subscription based coaching site or training site with more than 500 videos. And right now we're doing a little bundle deal with both Octopi, which also comes with Poker Go. It is ending in 1 day and 6 hours, so you do
Ooh.
not have much time to get part of this deal. It's $597 for 1 year of Learn Pro Poker, Octopi, as well as Poker Go.
That's
597 for all three. It's about 50% off across the board. I know Octopi, they're about to raise their prices as well. This is probably going to be one of the best prices you're going to get for the three of these. Taylor can post a link in it. You can get access to it right through there. So I strongly recommend checking that out. You really can't get much better value than that. And speaking of heads up and Octopi, they actually have some heads up ranges. I'm
hmm.
looking at them right now. They have stack sizes between 5 big blinds and 100 big blinds. However, it does use a larger ante, so I'm curious as to how people are going to be playing based off what the ante you guys use. We can discuss that. And as far as my own heads up background, the my longtime backers, guys I've been with for 10 years, they're the best heads up players way back in the day for Sit and Goes. So I've been coached in heads up by one of the best heads up short to mid stack players of all time. So I know this stuff pretty well and have a decent amount of experience both being taught it as well as studying it and then teaching it.
Nice. Yeah. Well, and you're so naturally versed in this stuff. It's just easy to understand when people are talking to you, kind of your passion for poker, the way that you think about the game. You're very immersed in it and you're very kind of fluent in the language of the game and the way that it functions. So I'm really looking forward to this. Um, and yeah, I will say that is a pretty cool bundle. So you can train at Learn Pro Poker, you can drill with Octopi, and then you can actually watch the live poker events through Poker Go. So it's got a bunch of different elements that different kind of
And
poker fans might enjoy.
one of the coolest tools on Octopi actually is in their trainer when you're doing final table studying. The spots that you can final table or that you can study in the trainer are actual final tables from Poker Go. And they have the most recent ones up. Like they have the one from let's see, Poker Go Cup earlier this year already, and they have the solves for correct ICM payouts for pre-flop and post-flop, and you can play through it. And when you're practicing, you can practice as a certain player, you can practice as a certain stack, you can look at player versus player, you can see the results. There's a ridiculous amount of data, and on top of that, when you're practicing a spot, when you study an exact spot, it'll take you to the video of it if you want to watch the actual hand being played. So
Nice.
it's a ridiculous tool that is really, really, really fun to use.
Well, and fun's what it's all about, right? I mean, this is a game. We're playing for fun, but it's more fun when you win. So that's why we're all trying to
Exactly.
improve and get better together. That's one of the things it's really at the heart of what we do here at Rec Poker. So thank you so much just for being a great friend. I mean, when you think about this, we're going back like 6, 7, 8 years,
Yeah, pretty close to the start of Rec Poker.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been wonderful working with you over all these years, and I'm excited to get
Thank you.
these matches
Appreciate that.
in the books
Likewise.
tonight. Yeah, dude. So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna be giving away some prizes tonight. If folks can, if you're interested, if you're in the chat, guess the winning hand for each of the matches. So we're going to give away two prizes, one for match one and one for match two. All you need to do is type the rank of the hands, like 7-7, king. Well, it won't be king 10, but other hands like that that you like. You don't have to say whether they're suited or offsuit or what the suits are or anything like that. If Chris Jones is in the chat, I know we'll see 5-5 pop up at one point just for Max trolling on Taylor. And I want to say a big thanks to Taylor Moss, who's not in our matchup anymore. Unfortunately, he exited in round two. But this whole MaREC Madness is really his brainchild. He's been a huge mover and shaker behind the scenes every year to put this together, and does a really fantastic job. So, Taylor, if you're out there listening, our hats off to you. Thank you so much for all you do here at Rec Poker. That's why I call you Tay Tay. It comes from a place of love and affection, and I just want everyone to know that you're my Tay Tay. All right. Well, we're gonna get started in just a couple minutes here, but if you're in the YouTube chat, I also want to just remind folks, if you get a chance, you can just pull your smartphone out and just Google food banks near me, and you'll find a fantastic organization that can benefit from a few dollars out of your pocket, a few volunteer hours out of your week, or some non-perishable food items from your pantry. And I would just encourage you to help support the fight against food insecurity. It's a real difficult time in the world right now, and you can help by just supporting your local food bank. And if anyone wants to make any donations through the YouTube chat, by a super comment, a super sticky, or a super chat, we share a portion of all those donations with a local food bank as well. So please get involved and get those guesses in there so we can give away a fantastic prize at the end of each match. So Ryan, you're very versed, as you were saying, in sort of the technical elements of heads up play, the opening ranges. What are some of the? We've got about a minute and change before the first match starts. What are some of the kind of very common mistakes and leaks that you think less experienced players make?
Honestly, it's a couple of things. I would say the probably the biggest mistake that people make isn't three betting enough, and then isn't check
Hmm.
raising enough. Both of those are just pretty massive mistakes. The other mistakes I would say that are super common as well, honestly, would probably be even though like people play pretty loose heads up, not actually playing loose enough, not opening
Hmm.
loose enough, and actually having folds and spots like for heads up, especially when there's an ante of any kind, you're really not supposed to fold the button, and people will still fold the button. But like those are like pretty common mistakes, or like those three things. Um, And then I would say not taking advantage of your opponent's mistakes.
Mm,
So when your
hmm.
opponent's making mistakes of not three betting enough, you should open every button. When your opponent is making mistakes of not check raising enough, you should be c betting more often. And those I would say would be like the most common things. And those are mistakes I expect to kind of see in these matches a little bit,
Yeah.
especially
All right.
the not check raising enough, just because it's really hard to do well.
I think that's definitely true. All right, so here we are. We've got the first hand. Eric Jin goes by Binkley at the bottom of your screen, and Ben Enslow at the top of your screen with Ace Nine offsuit versus King Nine offsuit. I'm very confident we're going to get an open from Eric here. These are two very aggressive players. They're not afraid to get their chips in the middle. Although, as you say, Ryan, I do find that this is true for a lot of recreational players. They're still used to kind of playing those hands that we think of naturally as being like good hands, like that top 20,
Yep.
25% of hands, 30% of hands. When you're playing heads up, it's not like full ring. You have to play every hand. And
Yep.
so,
They
people
really
aren't
do.
as, and so here, I like this three bet from Ben, like we're talking about, kind of promoting some of these not as strong hands
Yep.
into a good play here. So,
Yep. Ace nine here is definitely a value three bet. He should be going a little bit larger. You're 100 big blinds deep and out of position. So I'd be more picking a size around 4x. He went like just under 3x.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, sizing, that's another thing I think we're going to notice.
Yeah.
People kind of straying a little from the optimal line. And then we see a check on this run on this board.
So I don't mind this check. I think ace nine's a pretty good hand to continuation bet with. Having backdoor nut flush draw, backdoor straight draws, you know, having that ace of clubs is really important. Even though this is a board that's going to hit your opponent, you just have a really good hand to c-bet with, and your range wants to c-bet here.
Hmm.
Binkley actually has a pretty good hand to bet the flop with as well. I'm kind of surprised to see both players check here. Now you can see Ben's betting the turn and adding in a little troll, double trolls.
Yeah, I think well, I got a sense in the earlier matches that because the structures are good, the stacks are deep to start, these players do begin a lot of their matches with some kind of like some small ball, feeling each other out and kind of like establishing some baselines before they get jiggy.
Yeah, that's not too surprising, but there's still just spots where you just play your hand as it plays. You don't want to like be too passive. It's
Hmm.
just one of the biggest mistakes really to make in these matches, just in heads up in general. So I would have very comfortably see bet that ace nine. I would definitely would have bet the king nine as well, especially both having the club. Like the clubs there are really important cards.
Mm. Hmm.
Binkley here actually has a somewhat interesting decision. Like his hand is strong enough to check back. And the issue with c betting is Ben actually has a really good hand to check raise. So I
Mm.
think whether we're going to see Ben hitting a lot of these check raises will be if he check raises a hand like this, which is just a really high frequency combo to take.
And the turn helps, but the river doesn't. With the second jack on the board, kind of counterfeits Ben's two pair, but he's still ahead over Binkley's ace eight.
Yeah, having this jack of spades come in particular is pretty bad for him. If it was like an offsuit jack, he could actually bet this for value pretty
Mm.
comfortably because he could have like spades that are bluffs that are pretty natural bluffs. Curious to see if he'll open this 9-3 offsuit because this is, bottom 10, 12% hand. So if he's
Yeah.
opening this, he's opening everything, and it looks like he's folding, which I would not be folding that. I would just be raising it until my opponent starts really three betting me a lot. And then once they're three betting me a lot, then I would mix two more mixing strategies between limping and raising.
And I do notice that the ante here looks like it's 1/10 of a big blind each, so it's
Yeah.
actually it's small relative to the big blind, as opposed to if it was still 10% of a big blind each, but there were six or seven or eight players, then that ante's a lot bigger compared to the big blind, which means the pot's bigger, which means we should be going after it with more hands in our range.
But even like here, just any ante existing at all means we still get to play every hand. It means we should still be battling for it. It doesn't sound like it's a lot, but
Mhm.
it's just like when you're on the button, you're getting 3-1 odds to complete, and you have position, and there's that extra ante, so a tiny bit extra. So even without the ante, you're still getting really good odds just to play any hand, plus you have position.
Mm.
Generally when you're in the small blind, you're out of position. That makes a really big difference in terms of like how you get to play hands. here you're in position and getting these really good odds.
Great point. And we
So
see Ben.
interesting. Oh,
He
sorry, go ahead.
he opens with the 2-7 off, so that three
He
nine is a threshold hand.
he might have used the like deuce seven as a joke. Normally, maybe he folds 8-3, but he wants to raise deuce seven.
I like that. I like that. And I mentioned pocket fives were going to be prominently favored tonight. Of course, Eric gets in with the three bet with them on that last hand, making Chris smile somewhere.
I'm actually interested to see a hand like pocket fives three bet. There pretty much isn't a stack depth where you really want to use fives as a three bet there outside of like three bet jamming or something.
Hmm.
Just because it plays like it's a good hand, but not so good that you can push it for value. Ooh,
Yeah, not bad. Not a bad way to start for Eric here, an above average starting hand.
we did just see him three bet the fives, so I would see him be less likely to trap this type of hand now. If he hadn't
Hmm.
been three betting yet, maybe we'd see him like trap with this.
And in Ben's situation, when you're holding a hand like 9-7 offsuit, you're going to be in position. You're facing a three bet. It's a little bigger than some of the earlier ones. How do you respond to three bets in spots like this, where everyone knows you're opening really wide ranges, the other players three betting really widely? How do you proceed from there typically?
It mostly comes down to like what types of hands do I expect them to three bet with. If they're mostly going for value, I'm just going to fold a hand like 9-7 just because we're not getting good enough like implied odds or
Yeah.
overall odds in general. But if they're three betting a lot, then the playability of 9-7 goes up and up and up. Ooh, this is a cooler.
Yeah, this is gonna this could get spicy if we see the right flop. Oh my. Yeah, so Binkley flops top two. Ben flops top top with the backdoor
Jeez.
flush
Yeah, that's
draw.
brutal. Yeah, that's
It's
rough for Ben.
yeah,
Especially, Binkley has a hand that could have three bet pre-flop as well. Like
yeah.
he's such a strong hand.
And they're both kind of getting trappy here,
Oh
getting to the
wow.
turn, check, check. And it's another club for Ben. So this is gonna get bloody here, I think. I expect we'll see a raise from Ben to this one
Yeah,
third pot bet.
you would think if he checks back that he's doing it to like raise turn this type of turn for value for sure. Because he like kind of missed out on a street of value already.
Hmm.
And luckily for him, like Binkley has a hand that could have.
And I think this is probably just a call when Eric puts out the three big blinds there, I think, on the river. We'll see if Ben tries to raise for value.
I mean, his hand is definitely strong enough to raise for value for sure.
Hmm. And
He
he's
played
under repped
this
it.
so passively. Yeah. Like I would probably raise like ace nine for value as him.
Here we go. And he does. And now Eric's no, so how about this when like again, all our hands are getting promoted in our ranges because we're playing such wide ranges. Is this a spot? Can you three bet here as Binkley with top two?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. I mean, Ben could just have a hand like ace king. I mean, I wouldn't expect ace king, but he could have a hand like ace five. He could have ace three even. He could have jack five. He could have eight five. He could have three five. He could have like all of these different hands that are two pairs
Mm,
that can't fold. So
yep.
like if I was both of those players, I would have gone broke that hand. As
Yes.
like I would have three bet the ace jack, and then I would have four bet the ace king. I would have called the ace jack, and then I would have check call flop, check jam turn, and that would
Yep.
have been the match. It's already nines versus tens. I would probably also go broke on this hand with nines.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And Eric Jin he's been on the right side of these a lot over the last couple matches. He's been getting hit in the face with the deck, as Lorianne Persinger says in the YouTube chat. That's right. So Ben, just hold on. Hold on with your fingernails. You're gonna have to make some hands against lucky Eric Binkley over here. Are we going to use hands like these medium pocket pairs as four bets in spots like this, Ryan, or would you rather have like unpaired Broadway cards that have better blocker value?
I mean, honestly, nines is strong enough to just go for value with. I don't. I certainly don't mind this at all.
Yeah.
You just have a really good hand.
And
Even
now,
versus jam, you still have a really good hand. So this just comes down to, do you think your opponent is capable of jamming hands like sixes and like ace 10, ace five suited, that type of stuff?
hmm
And he can still four bet this for value, even with the intention of folding this. It would be completely and totally okay. Like most people, the way they think about like three bets and four bets isn't really correct. It's not,
Hmm.
oh, I'm only three betting this if I'm stacking off. It's I'm three betting this because I push good equity versus their calling range. So like his four bet can he thinks it has good value. Jeez. Versus another one, wow.
He's getting
That's
away from it.
ridiculous.
He's getting away from it. He's got the soul read. I think hey, we got to find out is are Eric Binkley's cards turned up right now because Ben is just getting away from some crazy damage tonight so far.
Yeah.
Look at this, another setup. Oh my God. Yeah. We are seeing some exciting hands, it looks like. Oh my God.
I probably would have gone broke with the nines versus myself.
Yeah.
And then this cooler too, I would go broke as ace queen suited. Because I three bet
It,
this, Binkley would four bet, and then I would stick it in.
Yep, I think that's very likely what we're going to see here. Um, and Eric has the what we call the Somsky ratio, which is the ratio of one player's stack to the other, based after named after a fantastic rec poker member John Somsky. And they got the Somsky ratio at 2 right now. So Binkley can even absorb a flip and loss and still have tons of chips in here.
Yeah.
So when
Also,
the
ace king suited is just a powerful hand no matter what. And ace king
yeah,
suited heads up is ridiculous. And ace queen suited is a powerful hand, and ace queen suited heads up is ridiculous.
yes, yes. And look
This
at
is
the
like
two of
the
them; they're having a lot of fun
yeah.
too.
This is like the equivalent of, just aces versus kings in full ring.
Oh yeah, yeah. And we get the call and advantage Eric again with two hearts on the flop. So let's see how our intrepid heroes play this out. I it
Kind of
it
interesting to see Binkley call this.
hmm
The only way I would consider calling it is if I thought Ben was like playing way too aggressively, and thought that he'd play like really tight versus a four bet. But I would just
hmm
like this pretty comfortably.
Let's see, facing an 8 big blind bet into 18. He's got two overs and the nut flush draw and even a sneaky little backdoor straight. You never know. So
This is a
um,
really large continuation bet by Ben. Generally, in these three bet pots, you only really need to go quarter pot. The only board
hmm,
textures you should really be upsizing on are like 10-9 X two tone, Jack 10 X two tone type board textures for the most part. And Eric here versus larger C bet, I might just like raise flop to stack off. I wouldn't expect Ben to fold many hands, and we just run really good equity.
yeah. And when we get to the turn like this, Ben's taking his time, but he's basically got a pot-sized bet behind in his stack, and so he's kind of got to decide: uh, is he gonna now? Would you like bluff with a hand like Ace Queen of Diamonds here?
No,
It's not
you
really a
definitely
value bet.
Yeah, no, you definitely want a heart in your hand. You
Yeah.
want to block your opponent's strongest continuing hands. So you want to block all the flush draws. Also, this hand, it has some showdown. So he doesn't
Hmm.
need to bet the turn as a bluff because it just has enough showdown. Even when he upsizes flop, he still just has enough showdown. And then, yeah, he can just find a quick, easy little fold.
Yep, it's got to be, but it hurts. You can tell it hurts them.
Yeah.
I love, I love seeing these players on the camera and like how, seeing them go through the emotional roller coaster that we're in here
Yeah, I kind
today.
of wish we could hear what each of them were saying and how they were trolling each other and stuff.
These
It
two,
is
no, go ahead, please.
it is crazy how hot Eric's running because every single time Ben's had anything whatsoever, Binkley's just had better. Like here, ace high, backdoor straight draw, backdoor nut flush draw. Binkley just has top pair of backdoor flush draw.
Yeah, yeah, he's got them covered. That's why I'm glad that Taylor puts these structures together, and I'm glad that he starts with a lot of depth, a lot of play. It's not just going to be like, one hand and it's over.
So Binkley here actually has a pretty good river value bet.
Hmm.
His hand has performed really well versus Ben's range.
It's
Ben
just,
versus a bet actually would have had a pretty easy call too.
yep.
So it
Now
does
this
seem to
is,
be that. Oh, go ahead.
no, and I was gonna say King 10 suited. Don't get me wrong. I love King 10 suited. It's just King 10 offsuit that needs to be taken out behind the shed and shot. That's all. King 10 suited is a great hand. Glad to see the open.
There's a spot for King 10. You'd open
Oh,
up a
there's a
bunch.
spot.
Cut
I got a
off the
spot.
hijack, below jack, position.
I like it as a three bet fold. I don't want to play with it. Just get it out of here.
Ben's actually almost at the stack depth where I would just be jamming deuces.
Yeah.
I actually think at his exact depth, I probably would have jammed it versus 2.2x. I definitely would have shoved versus 2.5x.
I do notice that's one thing. Our player pool tends to be less comfortable with just shoving, 30 big blinds or something like that. They get more like I think it's very natural at like 20, 18, 16 in the low 22, something like that. But 30 just feels like a lot of chips to most of our players, and they're like, I don't want to take a flip here if I don't have to.
It it is a lot of chips, but also it isn't. You have to always keep really things in perspective in terms of what the situation is. Like there's spots where, 25 big blinds versus an open is, it's a ton of chips. Why would you ever jam a small bit pair? But when you're talking about a hand like a pocket pair versus a late position open, or in this case versus button open, it's an auto jam. You make so much by shoving that not
Yeah.
shoving is just a huge mistake.
But Ryan, we want to see flops and make sets. Come on, man. How are we going to make sets if we jam free?
I'd rather make money than just try to hit a set.
And here you
Speaking of
go. Ben is
jams,
taking that line. Yeah, exactly.
yep,
And
yep, this
gets
is a
Eric to
really good
fold
shove
better.
candidate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Beautiful.
the and the A7 off is probably a call there. It's very close.
Mm,
Versus like what Ben should be jamming, A7 is definitely a call. Versus
right.
maybe what he is shoving, it might be a fold.
I think that's the correct adjustment. When our opponents are shoving tighter than optimally, we definitely have to tighten up our
Yep,
calling range as well. So that's a good
exactly.
adjustment to be making.
Especially with a hand that's like really marginal, which I would definitely view the A7 there as being very
Yeah.
marginal.
Now, I notice Ben's been introducing kind of a limping range as he's gotten down under 30 big blinds. Do you build a limping range into your heads up play? And is it
Oh yeah,
stack depth
definitely.
dependent? Yeah.
Um, it's more villain dependent than stacked up dependent. Sub 10
Hmm.
big blinds, I definitely have limps versus everyone. But at like 20 bigs, theory has tons of limps. But if my opponent's over folding flops, under three betting, I'm just opening every hand. But
Yep.
in theory, you're supposed to have limps at 100 bigs, at 50 bigs, at 30 bigs. At 30 bigs, in theory, even with a larger ante, or sorry, even with a smaller ante, you're probably limping like 60% of hands and
Mm.
then raising 40%. And then your raising range is actually going to be a little bit polar because you don't want to raise hands as you're getting jammed off of. Since in theory on 25 and 30 bigs, you're going to get shoved on a decent amount,
Yep.
you want to raise somewhat polar. So a hand like that 8 deuce off, I would have raised that.
Mm-hmm.
Or I
Mm-hmm.
would have limped it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, hmm.
Queen deuce
Eh,
here is actually a pretty good three bet candidate.
just because
You
it's
want to
got
use,
blocker value.
yep.
Yeah, please explain.
And it doesn't really have great post flop playability. The deuce isn't
Mm-hmm.
a great card. So this like dangler type card, this hand has bad post flop playability, but you block some strong hands. Speaking of strong hands, look at that top pair king high flush draw.
Yeah, he just can't. Eric can't stop. And the Somsky ratio's at like 5 now, which means that Ben's got a lot of climbing to do. But again, it's just, one double gets it to 40 90, and then another double, and he's in the lead. So it's anybody's game. Now, Ryan, is there a stack depth or is there a Somsky ratio where you feel like, okay, now this is strategically relevant? Like if someone has 1.5 your stack and your heads up, that's no big deal. If they
No,
have twice your stack, it's not great, but it's not the end of the world. Is
in the
there
heads
a
up, whether you're playing cash or singos or tournaments, it's all the exact same. There's no ICM. You're just playing. The
hmm,
chips are worth, what they're worth in terms of, dollars, and it's not like being covered by X amount or having whatever amount changes your thought process and approach. You're just trying to make the best chip decisions that you can make, and that's it.
and is that true sort of like no matter who covers who? Like if you're ahead, are you opening? Are you playing more aggressively? Are you sizing
No,
differently? No, it really
not
doesn't matter.
changing. I would size differently only based off of stack depth. I would only play differently based off of player type and stack depth and nothing else.
Interesting. Cool. Now we see Ben doing some trapping with that limping. He's been kind of
And
setting the
also,
trap and.
Eric not raising this ace nine suited preflop. Ace nine suited preflop out of raise, snapped off a jam.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll see what that trappiness gets Ben in this situation.
I do normally like, mixing in hands like this as traps, but you want to do it versus players that are playing really aggressive. Since Eric's
Hmm.
just had it every single time, I'm sure Ben's been somewhat aware of this, but Eric's obviously playing somewhat tight, even to Ben eyes. So he should have just raised this for sure pre-flop. Because if your opponent's not raising for you, how are you building the pot with these good hands?
Yep. Yep. Great point. And these players are they're pretty experienced and they're used to pushing edges, but they are still, recreational players. And I think that that is one common thing that we see is just players not playing aggressively with as wide a range and just taking that conservative approach with some of those threshold hands.
Also, unless you've studied heads up some or have watched it played a lot, you're not really going to understand what is loose and what is tight, really, just
Mm,
because you won't really have a good frame of reference for it. So in their mind, like they could be playing somewhat loose and not realize that they're playing too tight, which is super common, incredibly, incredibly common, even common in like full ring tournaments.
yep. Yep. Now Ben picks up bottom pair to go with his flush draw and puts about a three-quarter pot bet out there.
So
Does
the
not
turn deuce is
improve.
actually a
Yeah.
pretty good card for Ben to check back on,
Mm.
because he picked up showdown and he picked up extra equity. And usually you don't turn hands with showdown into bluffs, especially on the turn. You tend to want, like on the river now, he could use this as a bluff because his hand has very little showdown, and the 10's one of the best cards to go with the 7. So on the river, I would probably bluff this, but on the turn, I would have definitely checked it back.
And so would you prefer a hand like, 4-5 of hearts or something on the
Yeah,
turn as
four
a
or five
bluff
of hearts, I'm
there?
definitely just betting the turn with, and then I
Yeah.
would have jammed for sure.
Yeah.
His exact hand, when he does bet the turn, I think the river is a jam.
Hmm. And you're
One
just
of like the
continuing the story that you're telling on
Yep,
the turn.
exactly.
Yeah.
So like on the turn, he essentially value bet a pair of deuces, which obviously you normally wouldn't really do it on that really dynamic board texture. Which one of the things about, I mean, just poker in general, but a lot of the stuff that theory does is very logical. Like
Mm.
for the turn checking back, we have a hand with showdown that can't bet for value. Check.
Yes. Well, and I think that's a tough thing for players to grasp is that middle of the range, right?
Yeah.
People, and I think they hear, oh, I'm supposed to be value betting more thinly, and I'm supposed to be applying pressure, and that's true. But it's a
We
question
have
of,
a all in and a call.
oh boy, here we go. And Ben did hit the ace on the turn and brings it home with the double up, and gets that Somsky ratio down to
Yeah.
2. That's a very manageable number.
That's a very clean turn card to just go from, like
Yeah.
70% to just stone 100. Yeah. I I agree that these like middling hands are like very tough to play
Yeah.
because like people feel as though, oh, if I bet this, I just have like easier decisions to make. If I check, what if my opponent bets? What am I supposed to do when I brick? What am I? And instead, you need to be thinking, or at least try to think more in terms of, okay, if I check this, I have other hands I'm checking as well. My opponent
Yes.
can't just bet the river. Oh, if they do bet the river too much, I can just turn this into a bluff. Like if your opponent's betting too often, bluff them more. If they're not betting often enough, fold more. And it's
Yep.
just like finding that like back and forth. It's whatever you're worried about, it's probably much less of a concern because in your mind you're like overblowing what it is. So Ben here on the turn has a pretty good card to barrel on. Yeah, and he's following through on it.
I think you've hit on another leak that a lot of recreational players have, which is that they're not as experienced visualizing the entire range.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
and even pre-flop, they might think, okay, I know what my opening range is, but once you get past a decision point post-flop, I do think that players have a hard time maintaining in their mind what is the ever-lessening range of hands that go street by street through a poker hand. How
Yeah,
do you
that's
you must see that all the time. Like, how do you get better at that? Because it's such a crucial skill.
if you start with visualizing, it makes it a little bit easier. And also there's a tool that I teach on Learn Pro Poker which again, check out our school. And it's about incredibly simplifying the visualization parts
Mm.
of the game. Most people, they think in like that grid form with, all the different hands and like that type of stuff. You can actually think about it strictly as a line and use that to really simplify how you view it. It makes it much easier. And then
I've
once you get really good, like what I do is I visualize a line and the grid at the same time with thinking in terms of EV and equity and hand categories and blocker effects and all that type of stuff to go with it.
Yeah, I've noticed you using the line in your training videos as well, because I'm a frequent watcher and enjoyer of the LPP video collection, and I think that is a very intuitive way of getting at it. Oh, this is interesting.
Ooh,
So
this has been
fill up
fun.
on the river, but it's the worst possible full house. Let's see if Ben decides to put something out there, and it
Ben,
does. Ben and Binkley just snaps. There you go.
yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised to see Ben not bluff in this spot in general, but to like not decide to bluff on a previous street
Hmm.
and then bet the river as well. Just because like he has a pretty good hand to do it with gutter ball, no showdown, can turn some extra equity. And then on the river, he's definitely right to want to bet. I actually would have picked a smaller size because when he bets
Hmm.
that large, he's saying that he has either a very good hand or a very bad hand. Now that river nine, what good hands does he have? Is he going to bet ace high that large for value? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
So I would bet
Mm-hmm.
more like 1.5 big blinds where I could have ace high there.
Yes, and rep that value because these players they are experienced in kind of like reading the action and putting someone on a value hand when they make those smaller bets.
Binkley here with this high card, low card three bet. Great to see.
Yeah, I love that. Love that.
King 10. See, these are the types of hands that people tend to mix into their three bet ranges, but for heads up is way too strong of a hand. So this I would say would be a pretty common mistake as a three bet candidate. Like you want to
Yep.
go weaker than this heads up.
Mm-hmm. That
Ooh.
awesome power of the King 10 offsuit. And this is just a murderous turn for
Yeah,
these
that's
two
the
players. Top pair second and top pair top. Let's see if I think we'll get a raise from I guess a smooth call from Eric. That actually does give Ben some uh some hope because now it's going to be tough to get the whole stack in
Yeah,
on the
Ben
Queen
actually
River.
got kind of lucky that he decided to lead this turn card. This is a turn card that I would have check raised for value on, and then I probably would have blocked bet the river. So I would have
Mm-hmm.
picked. I would have lost a good amount of chips. I'd still lose a lot of chips on this river. Queen, I would bet very large for value here, as both players. As Ben, I would have been willing to go 2/3 pot, and as
Yep.
Binkley, I would have been willing to overpot this for value.
Mm-hmm.
I would have gone like 1.5x pot.
And that's another area that I think recreational players are less versed in with the overbets. Overbets are such a
Yep.
powerful tool, and obviously they're polarizing, but it's a very effective way. Now I find experienced players, professional players, really lean on the overbets to apply pressure to recreational players and less experienced players.
Yep.
Do you find and don't give away any of your own secrets here, but like okay, wow. So this is Ben turns the straight and we've got second pair for Eric. So we could see some
Yeah, that's
fireworks here.
definitely a super cooler turn here.
Yeah. And
Can't
again,
imagine Binkley folding at any
no
point.
chance. No chance. Oh, and that might just slow them down when that four straight comes on the river
Yeah.
with the nine of clubs. Makes it harder to get paid when you had it the whole way.
Binkley actually has kind of a pretty good candidate to like turn into a bluff jam on the river. I actually wouldn't mind
Mm.
like seeing something like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and Ben just decides I'm just gonna win this right here.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say like playing versus over pots, just in general is very difficult, whether you're a professional or recreational player. So it's just like a really powerful tool to be using, whether you are a recreational player or pro, because it
Hmm.
really puts your opponent under this huge amount of pressure. Now, the easiest way to do it for value is look for draws that brick and just be pretty confident that you have the best hand. If there's a lot of draws that all brick and you're pretty confident you have the best hand, that's actually when you should be picking pot size bets and larger because you have a lot of natural hands that want to bluff. The more
Hmm.
hands that you would want to bluff, the larger you can go with your strong value hands. They just
Yes.
go hand in hand together. And then
Yep.
on
I
the
love that.
opposite side of that, if your opponent's capable of thinking like that, then you can find some of these bluff catches. But yeah, that's like with that king 10, there was a lot of hands in that ace 10, king 10 spot where Eric would have had bricked draws. So even though he only has a second pair, his hand is actually the best hand almost always versus a check. So he wants to pick a large size.
Mm-hmm.
And this is definitely a bit of a cooler spot. Even though Binkley has second pair and has a jack of spades in his hand, he doesn't block a lot of draws. And that, ooh, wow, that's a good fold. That's a great
Yep.
fold.
Savvy players. Savvy players.
Yeah, I would have lost a lot of chips there. I just see, oh, 8-9 bricks, 9-7 bricks, 7-8 as a bluff, Jack 9 as a
Right.
bluff, Queen Jack, Ace Queen as a bluff, Ace Jack as a bluff. I just count draw after draw after draw. I'm not folding. I would only fold there if I thought Ben was playing really tight.
Right.
And Ben's been playing very loose aggressive.
Good, good. That's the key to winning these, and that's the thing, like you're talking about these hands you'd go broke on. It's because you're really wringing every ounce of expected value out of these hands.
Yep.
And that's a more volatile approach, but it's how you get the most value out of the
Right.
decision tree available to you.
And something that people kind of, ooh, it's kind of a fun turn card.
Okay. Yeah.
Ben turning some like little bit of showdown, having this like Jack of Spades as well. Binkley kind of got a bit unlucky that Ben actually turned some showdown and didn't actually bet the flop with this hand.
Yep. Yep. Very sneaky getting there, flopping it, and trying to give Ben some rope. And we'll see if
Yeah,
Ben calls down here.
Ben here does kind of have a difficult decision in the sense that Binkley's picking this polar size, which is kind of hard for
Yeah.
him to have like strong value here. And especially like doing it on the ace is kind of weird too. Like I'd have like check raise the river ace instead because it's a card your opponent's going to bet pretty often, especially in this check down line.
Hmm.
Um, and Ben's right to want to fold there because why is Eric betting into a card that's good for Ben?
Yeah, I like that way of thinking about it. When you understand ranges and sort of like that's actually my that's my board, that's my run out. Why are you betting
Yeah.
into me? Yeah, alarm bells, right?
Yeah, exactly. So going back to like volatility,
Yeah.
most people think about volatility wrong. They think in the sense, oh, if I'm playing more aggressively, my volatility is going to go up. One sec. 3-bet pot here.
Mm,
Like this eights is actually a great example of this. Like 3-betting eights here, it is quote unquote high variance. But more importantly, it's high value. And
mm,
actually, as the value extract goes up and as your win rate increases, volatility drops.
mm,
The amount of variance that you face as a poker player is entirely correlated to your edge in the event. So whether you're playing this hyper aggressive style or more middling aggressive style, you're going to end up having, the least volatility, the higher your edges in whatever game you're playing.
yep. Yep. And I think that's also kind of difficult to visualize, and it's a little counterintuitive to a lot of players. So,
Yep.
it's something that you really just have to kind of be immersed in for long enough that you believe it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly.
It's hard to get behind it.
This is why studying consistently is so important because if you're constantly improving and you're doing it very consistently, then you don't need to be worrying too much necessarily about how well you're playing. I
Hmm.
mean, you do in the sense that, like, yes, it is important, but if you're properly bankrolled, you're using good game selection, you're playing when you want to play, you have good mindset, and then
Yep.
the fact just that you're constantly working hard on your game, you can be reliant on you can be like pretty confident in the fact that you're probably going to be a decent sized winner as long as you're doing everything, quote unquote, correctly. But if you're not really studying very much and you're not staying on top of things in terms of where modern theory is at, you shouldn't be confident that you're correct on anything because how could you be if you haven't been studying? How can you be playing at a high level if you don't know what that high level looks like?
Hmm. Yeah, well said.
And I think like playing at a high level is this like really daunting thing to most people. But I think most people that are really interested in poker are math oriented ish, puzzle oriented. They're solver people, people that want to try to solve for a situation that's going on and build out this puzzle. And I think if you have that mindset, you can learn poker at a high level.
Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the game solving of it, right? The
Yep.
puzzle of it. That's right. I think that is what attracts a lot of players to a lot of
Yep.
different games. And poker's beautiful for that. I mean, it's such
Yes.
a rich, deep, elegant set of circumstances to analyze and strategize through. I mean, God, I love
Every
it so
hand,
much.
every situation is a unique puzzle, and I think that's what draws so many people to it. And
Yeah.
terms in particular are these complex, evolving puzzles that have a lottery attached to it, which is why so many people really enjoy those aspects of it. And if you understand the underlying basic structure of it, it makes making good decisions so much easier.
Mm-hmm. And that's the importance of not just sort of knowing plays or moves or spots, but really, like I mentioned at the top, being fluent in the game of poker. I
Yep.
think about it like, when we're traveling into a country where we don't know the language, sometime we'll use like a phrase book and we'll flip to the back and we'll learn how to say certain phrases, but
Yep.
we don't understand the syntax, the grammar, we can't form our own sentences. But when you learn a language and you actually start to understand it and you become fluent in it, then you really can master it in a way that isn't available otherwise. So interesting spot. So
Thankfully, oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
we got the
Oh,
sort of bluff phrase
ooh.
from Ben here, and
Oh,
unfortunately,
that's fun.
here it comes. I know, right? He's a shooter.
Yeah, what a rough river card for him.
I
So I
know.
bet on a lot of other rivers he's probably going to run this bluff, and he probably gets Binkley to fold.
I love seeing Ben. Ben has such an enthusiasm for the game, man. I love it. That's why he's such a pleasure to watch on his stream. Again, Sunday mornings, 9 a.m. Eastern. He's getting after it all day on Sunday here on the YouTube channel. Come check it out and root on our hero here.
Yeah, it's hard to have like that type of personality while streaming, especially while grinding. So
Mm.
he's able to do that type of thing all day through the stream. More power to you. I've streamed a decent amount in the past, and when you see guys like, um, I don't know, like Kmart and Arlie and any of the other like higher energy streamers, they can keep that up for any amount of time. It's so impressive.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a big part of it, and you're distracted, and you're paying attention to the chat and the replay, and you're also trying to play your best poker at the same
Yeah,
time. It's a lot.
incredibly tough to do.
Yeah.
Interesting there to see Binkley bet the turn with his ace eight. Picks up that gutter ball, has that ace high showdown. Both players seem to be betting like these like weak showdown-y, drawy hands instead of
Mm.
realizing that they just have good showdown, that they're pushing them as bluffs instead of taking them as checks.
And so you'd rather that they got to showdown with those hands and chose worse hands to bluff with and better
Yep,
hands to value bet with.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I got this may be an odd question, Ryan, but when you start with such wide ranges, I guess it's going to depend a lot from board to board, but is there like a proportion of your range that's in the middle versus the proportion of your range that's in that top and bottom? Like, I know, of course, certain boards you're going to be checking back at a higher frequency than others, but proportionally speaking, are most of your hands in that condensed range, or are most of your hands in the top and bottom part of the sandwich there?
Most hands are in the top and bottom part of the sandwich. It's pretty hard to have like middling showdown hands just because even though it sounds like they're in the mid part of your range, they're actually in like the top quarter, a third of your range. Most of your
Mm,
range are hands that don't have any showdown really. Even in heads up, a lot of them are just hands that don't really have showdown. It's very hard to make a pair to make, ace or king high. It's
yep.
why like you're constantly betting in these heads up situations because
Hmm.
you just constantly have these like not great hands.
Yes. And you see a lot of spots where both players miss, and the only
Yep.
one who's going to win is the one that puts chips in. So that's a dynamic
Yep.
we've seen a lot in these
And this
matches
is
for
why
sure.
the aggression in theory ramps up. Like that
Yeah.
queen five is actually a call.
Mm.
You have like backdoors, you have over, you have straight draws, you have all these things kind of going for you. And the 9-7, I do like that as a bet. He could have also check raised it too, though. Really good hand for both options.
Mm.
This 7-8 suited is actually a pretty good check raise candidate. I was talking earlier about people under check raising. I want to use like these types of hands that have like these backdoor straight and flush combo draws are really good.
Yeah. when I was doing some coaching with Matt Affleck last year, that was one of the things that he really helped me understand was those 3x3 hands. You got three to a straight, three to a flush, but not a made
Yep.
hand. That's a great semi-bluff check raise
I
candidate.
like that
So
term, 3x3.
yeah, yeah. Well, Matt Affleck, hell of a guy. Um, 90% sure we're gonna be. Well, actually, I'm pretty sure we're gonna be seeing him next week. There's a couple fun stuff, fun rec
Nice.
poker things happening with Matt next week. Yeah. Now, again, still got plenty of play here. Ben's getting down in the Somsky ratio again is about 3.5, but still got over 20 big blinds and
Yep. Still lots of
uh,
play,
lots of play, lots of room to run.
especially with the point one as an ante instead of a full big blind ante. You get so much
Hmm.
play.
Now, is there a stack depth for either player where you typically just start open shoving pre-flop and it's not a question of limping or opening anymore?
Hmm. With only a point one ante, like because even on like three bigs, you can still have some completes.
That's amazing. Yeah,
It's
wow.
like
That I don't
maybe at
think
like
many of our listeners were
I
expecting
think maybe
that.
I would stop min opening on like five bigs, but I would still be
Yeah.
completing on five bigs. I would still
Yeah.
have plenty of completes on seven bigs and eight bigs, nine bigs.
And I'll just for our listeners, what you're saying is that you're going to be like limping the small blind in this
Yep,
spot with
lots and
some of the
lots and
hands that you're
lots.
not opening, because that just allows you to play a wider range of hands by
Yep.
having some open raises and some limps.
Yep. And the way that this heads up play, even here, you're getting 3 to 1, 3.5 to 1, or yeah, 3 to 1 odds and some change in position. Like, why wouldn't you want to play every hand?
Hmm. Now this one might be a bloodbath. We got top two to Ben, and Eric's got the open ender and an over. The clubs might slow them down though. But Ben's got to be putting some chips in the middle. Here he goes for half pot bet, and we'll see what Eric decides to do.
Pretty dirty river card.
Yeah, yeah, there it is. Yeah, no kidding. Oh man.
Yeah, like
So,
I definitely would have gone broke as Binkley here. I'd have c-bet flop, probably gone check raise and stuck it in. Not thrilled,
yep.
but and then actually as Binkley, I think this river check is fine, but he could actually still bluff this. This hand has some showdown, but I don't mind using it as a bluff just because Ben's gonna have a lot of like two pair combos and some lower straights that just are
Mm-hmm.
auto check folds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of it's just boards like this where it's hard to hit them.
Yep.
Put that small bet out and profit is often the best advice.
Like Binkley, the hand before would what a flop. God, he's just like
Wow.
hashing it over and over and over and just
No
ring
kidding.
bent so often.
Unbelievable. That's Eric Jin, ladies and gentlemen. He knows how to hit it. And Ben's got just enough of it here with third pair that he's going to be a little resistant to giving up. That ace obviously is going to scare everybody. But I wonder, Ryan, because we're playing such wider ranges pre-flop, it's not like the ace really favors one player or the other as much as it would in full ring.
It'll favor whichever player was the last aggression.
Yeah.
Um, so even the complete would count kind of as an aggression. So if it goes complete and check, then the complete player has more strong hands in the range because the player that checked their option is supposed to raise their ace X almost always. So like Eric
Yes.
here has actually been folding a decent number of hands. Each one of those folds is not only is it a mistake, it's like it's actually kind of large mistake because you're
Mm.
getting really good odds in your position. So why would you be folding anything? You
Yep.
can like the weakest hands, like the Doyle earlier that he folded, just use it as a raise. Like plays
Hmm.
really well as a raise. Your opponent folds, that's great. If they call, it's fine. You still like most people when they think about like getting called, they're like, oh, I really don't want to get called. I go, oh, I really don't care if I get called because if I get called, I get a continuation bet opportunity, which
Yes.
that's where you make a lot of money, whether you're playing heads up or tournaments. I see those as profit centers. So
Mm.
most players think about flops backwards. They go, oh, if I get called, this isn't a great thing unless I have a good hand. When really it's if you get called, that's just a good thing that happened, whether you have a good hand or a bad hand. And then you just get an opportunity to see bet, which is great.
Yeah, Sky Matsuhashi talks about that. He calls them bread and butter spots where you're in a heads up pot in position and you are the pre-flop aggressor. And
Yep,
it's
that
just
is.
that's the way to be. Your range
Yep,
is uncapped, your opponent's range is capped, you're in position,
yep,
like it's a profitable place to be.
yep. That's where you make a lot of your money tournaments. Yep. So this should be an all-in and a call.
Yep.
Whoa.
I think it Wow, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I thought Eric was gonna snap him off there with pocket sixes.
Yeah. Eric's been playing just very tight in a lot of spots.
Hmm. Well, he knows he's got the deck edge, so he doesn't want to take a flip. He'll just make two pair on the flop and then get it
He
in.
was cornering him right there. He just didn't even realize it. He already had the deck edge.
Must be nice, Eric.
I mean,
Actually,
Ryan's.
I can't really needle Eric because I laid a terrible bad beat on him in Vegas a couple years ago, and
Oh yeah.
I think he's still a little salty about it. But Eric, I hope you're enjoying that sweatshirt. Oh, I love these guys. This is so much fun. Now, let's see. They both have a pretty high diamond, so they're blocking the flush draw. Ben picks up bottom pair on the turn. And will he bet for kind of, we talk about like equity denial and chooses not to and is rewarded top and bottom on the river.
Yeah,
I can't,
with this turn, you don't really, again, you don't really want to bet these hands because your hand is just good enough to just get to the river, especially when you're in
yeah,
position. If you're going to bet those types of hands, you want to do it more likely when you're out of position, where then you're betting for those equity denial reasons and getting to a
yep,
cheaper river and so on and so forth. In position, when you check and you either get to the next street or the hand ends, that's when you really don't want to bet those weak hands with showdown. So like that 8-4 would have actually still been an okay check raise candidate because
mm-hmm,
he really hasn't been taking any check raises. So if you just want to use that type of hand with like no real showdown, some backup draws, that would be a completely, totally okay hand to use. It's when you're check raising consistently, that's when you really want to use that 3x3 term.
yes, yeah, good point.
I would say like if you're like watching this match and everything that I'm saying is like really surprising in terms of how aggressive you need to be, not only do you really need to work on shorthand in terms of aggression, but you probably need to work on a lot of full ring aggression spots because
Mm-hmm,
a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, obviously not quite as elusive ranges, they're all the similar types of mistakes that players make. You know, betting for value with the wrong types of hands, not bluffing often enough, not three betting enough, not check raising enough. All that stuff across the board is just in heads up. It's a lot easier to see and understand when you know it well, it's easier to see those mistakes and just how significant.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh boy, it continues. I was gonna say, I wonder if, okay, so it actually doesn't even, I thought that might be a little spicy, but I think Ben's gonna get away from it here.
The chopped pot, I hope it
Right.
goes check, check. Yeah.
Does everybody love a chopped pot, Ryan? Is that what I've heard?
In
Do you
that
have
spot,
do you have a musical interlude that you could share with us about how everyone loves a chopped pot?
yep, definitely, especially in that spot.
Uh,
Definitely not the board you expect to see a chopped pot on.
right?
So Ben here three betting with the queen jack. It's actually
Yep.
like not that bad of like a value three bet. Just because it
Mm.
has like pretty good playability. But Eric isn't the player that I would three bet Queen Jack off for value from. Reverse just because Eric's been like pretty tight. And like you can tell Eric's been tight just by the fact that he's been folding. Just by the fact that
Hmm.
he hasn't check raised us yet. Like I wouldn't have needed to watch him play at all to see that he's playing too tight. Like I can just see it almost immediately. Like within 10 hands, I would know what type of player Eric was in terms of how he approaches heads up. I would have just been max exploiting every single decision versus him and just grinding him down.
And I think when our listeners think about players being tight, they're mostly thinking about like having narrow pre-flop ranges, and just like not opening very widely, overfolding pre-flop. And you're really talking about it more as sort of just generally not pushing edges and maybe like overfolding post-flop. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. Like just missing aggression in these like there it doesn't need to be like in that big of spots either. Like it's mostly these like really small spots in which the
Hmm.
aggression is really important and it's kind of easy to implement. Like just because I'm saying, oh, you should be check raising here, doesn't mean you check raise and then triple barrel off. Or
Right.
it doesn't mean, you three bet and just like barrel blindly. Like we're still like hoping to hit really good cards in order to keep putting in chips. It's more about like very controlled aggression, but very
Hmm.
consistent aggression.
And I
Like the
think there's some,
queens.
yeah,
Oh,
please.
go ahead. I was
Uh,
gonna say like that queen six, I would have called or three betted.
right.
Like really good three bet candidate.
And I
This
like
king
your
three.
point. I like your point about not having to continue all the way through. Like
Yeah,
sometimes, like just having a plan, or like this is a good check raise spot. And when our opponent doesn't fold, that means that they're continuing with a very strong range. That's what it
right.
means for it to be a good check raise spot. It means they
Yeah,
fold a lot.
exactly. Yep, exactly. Now there are spots where in theory you are supposed to check raise loose and barrel, but like yeah, for the most part, if you're just like more carefully going after it, since most of the opponents you're playing versus will also be making all these same types of mistakes, you can be this controlled aggression,
Mhm.
apply it very easily into even, whoever's watching right now. If you think you can't do it, you definitely can.
Yep.
You just need the right type of teacher, place to learn, pro poker.
Nice.
To me, like the hard part about playing tournaments and all this type of stuff isn't actually that stuff. It's more dealing with you take all this and then you add ICM
Right.
and bankroll management, game selection, and playing multiple tables, and.
Now, I'm kind of curious. I talk about this on the show quite a bit. Out of like the top 10 skills as a poker player, where would you place game selection and bankroll management?
Hmm. Bankroll management, skill number one. Game selection, skill number two.
Okay.
Playing
Yeah.
well, skill number three.
There, I love to hear it, man, because I preach it all the time and people don't want to hear it. People do not want to hear about these unsexy skills of poker like bankroll management and game selection, but they are crucial
Yeah.
to your success
Bankroll
as a player.
management is the number one most important skill to have as a poker player, gambler in general, whether you're doing it for fun or as a profession. If you do it wrong, you go broke.
I love it. Thank you. That's very validating.
Doesn't matter how well you play, if your bankroll's always in play, you will go broke. It's just how
Yeah,
math works.
good point. Good point. I see in the YouTube
Can't
chat,
outrun
yes,
math.
we got Ben's actually taking a lead in the chip count here. So we're switching sides. Eric is going to have to really, well, he's already got top pair on this one, so that's a good sign. But he's uh, he's given some back. We got Ben in first
Not
place so
surprising
far.
to see Ben take the lead. Now that he's been not really running into these cooler spots, he's just playing a style that's a little bit more consistently aggressive. And
Hmm.
since it is enough more consistently aggressive, unless Eric, finds some cooler spots or some suck out spots or whatever, most of the time what we should see is Ben should just be grinding him down. Like I, as Ben, would actually be playing a very protected style at this point, where I'm just opening every button, I'm c-betting every flop, I'm check raising the boards that I expect to be auto bets where I think they're going to overfold, and that's it. I'm just grinding down my opponent.
Hmm. And it doesn't, it sounds like it actually doesn't matter as much about the really big hands. Like the really big hands, of course, they're going to swing the match one way or
Yeah,
the
I
other.
mean
But
it's like the big hands are kind of coin flips. Like if one
yes,
person has a really good hand, the other person has a really good hand. If you both would have played it the exact same, it's just a coin flip. One of you was just on the good side of the flip. Just what happens. So it's those hands don't matter at all outside of the variance of it. Like I'd rather, have them have my favor, but
sure.
in terms of like how the results are going to play over the long term, those hands just don't matter. the hands that matter are these small and medium sized pots because those really show how well you're playing in heads up.
Hmm. And they're much more frequent, right? Like yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's not like full ring. Well, actually, like, let me ask you. So is it more important to win those small pots in heads up than full ring just because you're in every pot?
Yeah, in that sense, yes. But I would actually say that pretty much everyone undervalues the importance of small and medium pots in tournament poker.
Yep.
Like how you build big stacks is for playing lots of small and medium pots. You're always surprised to
Mm.
see, these aggressive players build these big stacks. Well, they should be because they're winning all these small and medium pots.
And is there one sort of missed skill that separates less experienced players from those that you're talking about that can just kind of like keep winning? Is it just controlled aggression, controlled aggression, controlled
Controlled
aggression?
aggression, but really making sure you know opening ranges and not
Mm.
open limping in spots that you just are never open limps. Like
Yep.
you never want to open limp in early to mid position deeper than 15 big blinds deep. You should just never do.
Yep.
And really, even for most players, they should just never open limp sub 12 bigs unless they're on like button cutoff. And even then, if you entirely removed open limping from your game, from every position except the small blind, you'd already immediately be playing a lot better if you're a player that utilizes it.
Yep.
And then if you just learn opening ranges, those two things combined can double your ability as a player immediately. You can go
I
from
love
being
that.
like a minus 30% player to a minus 15% player just with those changes and nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
how big of a difference it makes. It makes a huge difference.
Oh yeah. Well, the only way to win a hand when you're limping is by making a hand. You know, if you're
Yeah.
open raising, you actually have that ability to win
Yeah,
by
you
your
can just
opponent's
take it down.
folding. Yeah, that's a huge difference.
The other thing as well is your opponents will make bigger mistakes versus raises than they will versus limps. If you're
Hmm.
not allowing your opponents to make bigger mistakes, where are you making money from?
Great point. I love it. Very well said.
And
Now,
if
are there,
that's still, oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask, so like, are there, because our players do like to limp for the same reason they
Yeah.
like to call, opens and that kind of stuff, because they like seeing hands, they like seeing flops. Are there hands that you would like give people permission to over limp with? Are there something like hand qualities or characteristics of
Over
hands?
limping's fine. Because once there's already a limp, they're already telling you that they have a pretty good hand. So over limping there is okay. But you want to over limp with like pairs, like best multi-way playability hands, so like suited connectors, that type of stuff. I
Mm.
still attack limps incredibly loose. Like
Hmm.
I'm ridiculously loose versus limps because I view people who limp as the people I make money off.
Yes,
So I want to play as many pots with them as possible, and I want to play as many raised pots with them as possible.
I love it. Now this could get juicy here. We've got the middle pair for Ben, and okay, but we do have the flush come in for Eric, and let's see if he bets it. I think interesting micro bet there. Just one big blind into 10 on the river.
Yeah, definitely the type of spot where you do want to use that type of bet. You don't need to go any larger than that. You kind of want to like your hands want to be best a lot. And Eric's been playing very tight. So since he's been playing very tight, you can just block bet and fold to a raise very comfortably. You don't
Mhm.
have to worry about getting bluffed ever.
Yes, yeah. Blocker bet's another thing that I think a lot of recreational players are underutilizing. It took me forever to get around to it. I was just like checking and then being in this terrible position of having to decide whether to call or not when someone puts a bigger bet out there. It's like bet folding, man. It prints if you're playing in the right against the right players.
Yeah, for sure.
Now let's see. We got an ace in Ben's hand and 15 bigs. He does shove, and he doesn't know that Eric's got pocket tens. Doesn't look
Speaking of
good.
coolers,
Yep. Speaking of coolers, exactly. Now let's see. Eric's even got the diamond, so he's cutting into the outs for Ben. Four on the turn. That is not the river Ben needed. Congratulations to Eric Jin Binkley. He is a finalist in the top two going into MaREC Madness, the finals next week. Holy cow, it's going to be exciting. So, t you were saying, Ryan, you basically think that it was coming down to the difference between the basic aggression level of the players that kind of gave
Yeah, definitely.
Ben an advantage there. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely say that Ben had a pretty significant advantage there. They did, he just got cooler over and over and over and over and over. And, variance just happens. But even then, like, when I say he has a big advantage, we're talking about heads up play, even starting 100 big blinds deep. Like, maybe he's going to win like 58% of the time. Like,
Right,
that's a big
right.
advantage. Heads up.
Yes.
And like, maybe if I was, playing versus someone that plays more tight passive, tight aggressive, maybe in this format I'm gonna win 60% of the time. Like getting
Hmm.
past that, just it's still a flip. It's like,
Yes.
heads up, just like if there's a lot of variance involved, edges are very small, so having anywhere from a +4% to a +10% edge is massive in these heads up matches. I wouldn't really expect anything larger than that, even when you have like a perfect matchup.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just one of those things like every edge is important in a game like poker. You really got to seize those opportunities. So I like that approach. That makes a lot of sense to me. We got the last match of the night, Scott DFS Bratt versus Rob Washam. This one's going to be a banger. So I mentioned at the top, Scott's a very active player, streams on multiple days. He's got a study stream on a Wednesday morning, but he's also out there on the streets on Saturdays and Sundays. You can check him out on the Rec Poker calendar. Rob Washam, who runs our book study, has been a Wrecking Crew member for longer than pretty much anyone here at Rec Poker and is very studied and definitely he knows his ranges. He's very technically skilled. And he plays the old man coffee just because he's got a white beard, but don't buy it for a second. He is ready to unleash on anybody that steps in his way. So here we go. The first hand goes to DFS Brat at the bottom of your screen there. That's Scott Beckham. And at the top, we've got our Rap Man 50, Rob Washam, with pocket eights. Now, I want to just remind our listeners, if you're watching live, get your guesses in. I don't think we had a winner in the first match, but we've got a whole nother match to go. I see some folks are getting in there. Stu, Dave, Jesse, hey gang. Thanks for joining us this week. I hope you're having fun. It's another one of those spots where I find it so much harder to range opponents when we're playing heads up because the starting ranges are so wide that is there, do you kind of get into a rhythm with that? How do you approach hand reading differently heads up, or is it just the same
I mean,
process
it
starting with
definitely
wider ranges?
works differently for sure. The thing is with how loose it is, that obviously makes it kind of difficult. Sorry, one sec.
Yeah, take your time. And we got bottom pair for Rob here, but ace
So
high
like
for Scott. Yeah, Ryan.
in this spot, like great example is ace high here is actually a pretty good hand. Like you don't
Mm,
need to like run a bluff with it. Bottom pair is a pretty good hand. So
yeah.
just everything just like goes up. Like
Hmm.
uh, uh, in
Yeah.
heads up, just because you're playing every single pot, everything just goes up, 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 up.
Yeah.
So getting dealt, even here, getting dealt king high, you have a good hand. It's not like
Right.
it's not a great hand, and I wouldn't call it even that decent, but it's still pretty good. And like the reason why we use it as bluff occasionally is because even though it has pretty good playability, it
Hmm.
has that blocker.
And that makes a big difference. That really cuts down the number of combos that our opponents can continue with. And again, we're talking about stacking small edges. That does really make a big difference in our total value in the match here.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing as well is that like when you're
And
like approaching a lot of these like heads up spots, it makes a pretty huge difference in terms of using that consistent aggression. Because if
hmm
you're missing it, like we saw Eric do in a lot of spots, then you're missing a lot of situations relative to the hands that you're playing. Like you're like these heads up matches,
Mm.
since you're playing every single hand essentially, when you miss, the the best 30% of spots to see bet light or to bet light for value, you're missing 30 of 100 hands that you play. While in, say,
Right.
full ring tournaments, you're only playing like 25% of hands on average. So if you miss, a percentage of those hands, it's not actually a large percentage of the pots that are being played. Most of your decisions are just folds anyways. But
Hmm.
here you can't hide with folds. So your mistakes are very clear and they're very obvious, even if you're not ever going to showdown that often. But in heads up, you go to showdown pretty consistently. So it's like if you play, for the mixed game players here, a good stud player can watch someone play like 3 hands of stud and have a pretty good idea as to the types of mistakes they're going to be making in a lot of spots.
Mm.
You can see him play an hour of stud and know exactly how this person will play almost every hand going forward.
That's wild.
And that kind of happens in heads up.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, I like you're saying there's nowhere to hide. You can't hide in the folds. That's a cool way of getting at it. I knew we were going to
Rob,
get a lead from Rob there. He's got to get some value somehow.
yeah,
And
Rob playing
Scott,
very trappy here with this king five.
yeah.
Actually, as him, probably would have bet the turn because when
Hmm.
our opponent checks back, they're kind of telling us they have a hand with showdown.
Yep. And not a king, right? When they
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
bet top pair on the flop.
I would say that that's kind of like the other type of mistake that's pretty common that people make is, in heads up, since you're supposed to be c betting so consistently, that when they check back, it's not
Mm.
actually likely they're weak. It's more likely that they're strong. Have that
Hmm.
medium strength showdown. So when my opponent checks back and I have this really strong hand, if I don't think my opponent's strong enough to bet, which they most likely aren't, I need to bet my own hand for its value that it's worth.
Yep. 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 I like that. Now, you were talking about sort of not being able to hide in the folds and having to play more hands, and so being in these spots with more marginal hands. Obviously, the difference between full ring and heads up, that's very dramatic. Do you know, like, is that also relevant when you go from like full ring to six max or four max? Like, you're playing more hands. I'm sure it's not as drastic a difference, but is it still a concern
Yeah,
or a
it's still
factor?
a really big difference. I mean, even going from like 9-handed to six max, that's a huge difference in terms of percentage of hands that are being played in general. It's
Hmm.
also a really huge difference between, say, something like cash and tournaments. If you're going from playing like 1-2, 1-3, or like 3-5 live, you're way more likely to just being forced to play very tight because of rake and no ante. Well, when you're playing full ring tournaments, opening range under the gun 40 bigs, that's like 20% of hands. An opening range under the gun in 1-3 cash, especially when you're opening like $8 or $10, you should be opening like 6%. It's a huge
Right.
difference.
Yes.
Massive. And then heads up is just an insane, insane, insane difference.
No, Scott's just he wants to see anything but a heart or a king, and he can lock this up. And I think we'll see a bet, yeah, about a third pot here from Scott.
Like in heads up, this top pair, top kicker, like you get check raised, you're three betting that for value all day.
Yes.
But instead, in a tournament, if I open that for mid position and big blind calls and they check raise, whereas most opponents, I'm calling and a little bit worried. That's like the difference. It's just like I would just say like really the easiest way to think about it is just double all hand strength. Whatever you think you have, just double
Ah,
it in value. And
cool.
then
I love that.
anytime like you think about like ace high or like bottom pair, triple it in values. So essentially ace high is like third pair. Bottom pair is like second pair. Mid pair is like top pair. Top pair is like top top. You know, top pair good kicker is like two pair. Just like up everything a decent amount in terms of hand
I
strength.
love that. That's something Rob Washam would immediately get behind in the book study. So Rob's read all these poker books. He leads our members through them every 2 weeks, chapter by chapter, puts slides together. It's fantastic. One of the thing, and so he's like this font of wisdom for so much of this stuff, and so many of these little heuristics and like these general rules like that. So he talks about like in ICM situations, we do the exact opposite, and
Yeah,
we kind of
exactly.
demote. Big
Tone
bets
it
become
down.
small
Yep.
bets. Small bets become calls.
Speaking of
Calls
big
become
bets, look at
folds.
this.
Hey, here we go.
He raised turn with his bottom pair and now going for like 2/3 pot on the river, which I actually really like this bet size. It's big enough based off the story that he's telling that he can have a hand like two pair. You can see Rob there folded, top pair, king kicker,
Yeah.
flush blocker. I think DFS turning his hand into a bluff there is really creative combo to use, but he got Rob to fold a hand that's never really supposed to fold, which is a good use of aggression.
That's what
Like
we're
if you're going
talking
to
about, right?
run bluffs, you want to do it in like maybe that type of spot. His hand is still a little too strong, but his hand's a little too strong when it's bottom pair on 3 to a straight, 3 to a flush, and it's still a little too strong. Now, if he had a heart in his hand, probably would have gotten more behind it. Even
No, I
like
like.
this here, like Rob is turning his 8 into a bluff when he doesn't need to.
It's got too much showdown value to bluff with it. You should just be
And
getting it, checking
yep,
it.
exactly. And it's like not strong enough to bet for value, so it's
Hmm
like just a check. Now, this is a great candidate to use as aggression. That Jack of Spades, one of the
Yeah.
perfect cards. As you said before, it's a 3x3.
Yep.
And this one's a 3 to a straight flush. So I would have check raised flop and then just given up on turn.
Mm-hmm.
And good to see DFS there use a large turn bet size.
Yes.
Turn card is a card that's really good for his range. It's also a card that it didn't complete any draws or anything, and it added extra draws. You can also see like DFS is like switching around his sizes a bit too. Also, does he prefer DFS or Scott?
I think he actually prefers DFS, Brad.
I,
I think he
I,
does.
I figured you would know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's really immersed in his online play and sharing it with the group. And he's DFS Brat everywhere. You can find him on all the socials, and
Nice.
he's got his own Twitch channel and that kind of stuff. He's a very, very fun poker character. Really loves the game, and it comes through. It comes through in his game for sure.
So like this Queen 10, you can actually play this as a check back. Like you can play it as
Hmm
a bet or you can play it as a check back. Because it's
hmm
like it's such a good candidate to use as a bet that I really don't mind betting it. But it's strong enough to actually check back and heads up, even though it's only Queen high.
Yep. And it might be
And then
just enough to get
rivers,
get him in trouble here.
yeah, it's a dangerous river card. I don't think you can fold it.
No, I
Because like
don't think
on
so
that
either.
river queen, is DFS going to be betting a king that often? Probably not when there's that turn
Hmm
eight. So like DFS's river betting range is like 9x and busted flush draws.
hmm
Jack 10, which we block.
Good one to call with.
Now this is a really interesting flop. Rob flopping top pair and DFS flopping an up down straight draw with the 5 of clubs in his hand. To
Hmm
me, having this up down draw plus the club, definitely go candidate.
Yep. So I'd like to see him put some chips in here. So, and what about the sizing when you're in a spot like this?
Great, great, great bluff candidate, great size. Don't need to go
Awesome.
any larger than that. Do you think your opponent's like way overfolding? You could go smaller. Ooh,
Wow. And that's why,
yeah.
that's why we do it, right?
So it looks like
Yeah.
he's going real greedy, going for the pot size bet, but I really don't mind it. And as you can see here, Rob just like snapped it off. As Rob, I actually would have thought about it a decent amount because, when someone check raises flop and then, turn goes check, check, and they pot the river, well, they're telling this like weird, incongruent story. These pot size bets, these like really large bets near pot or over pot, are so under bluffed that I need
hmm
to know that my opponent is very, very, very capable in order for me to be willing to bluff catch.
That was actually going to be my question earlier when we were talking about overbets, because I think it's an exploit that pros use against less experienced players, and it feels like everyone feels like it's a bluff, but doesn't have the stones to call. In your experience, is it a balanced use? Is it often a bluff and they're just counting on you
Um,
not
so
having
the
a
way that I do it is, I know this is very hard to like for y'all to visualize or implement or anything, but anytime my opponent has this weak capped range, as in they have a hand that they've told me how they've played, essentially based off how they've played, that they never really have the really good stuff because they would have, raised at a previous street. That's when I'm over pop bluffing a lot.
Mhm.
And then once a situation where like a lot of natural things get in, then those are spots where I'm actually not over pop bluffing very often because my opponent has a lot of easy hands to call with. So
And so
that's actually how I,
you'd be value betting to that size in that
yep, I
spot
would
instead?
use like anytime my opponent can have a lot of really strong hands, I'm over pop bluffing only with my really strong hands. Anytime it's very hard for them to have a strong hand, I'm going to be over pop bluffing way more.
Yep, very cool. I think that's
Which I
actually very
know it's
helpful.
like,
No,
yeah, I
no,
know.
that's what I want. That's what I want because a lot of recreational players they think about it based on like their own hand strength
Yeah,
and the board and how those two things intersect. But the missing piece is your opponent's range, and your
yeah,
opponent's range is like the most important thing in
yeah,
poker. Like you really
exactly.
got to
It
be
really
focused
is.
on that.
It's
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
It's So both DFS and Rob here have both been playing a little bit more loose aggressive than our previous match.
Hmm.
And they're still making a lot of the same types of mistakes. They're still overvaluing some of their, king highs. They're undervaluing ace high. Um, like this match is playing very differently than the previous match, yet the same types of mistakes are being made.
Mm.
It's just being made in a more aggressive fashion.
And like you pointed out, it's really the the aggressive fashion is going to give you that edge, but ultimately
Yep,
playing sound poker is the biggest edge you can give yourself.
exactly. So actually, as DFS here, I actually would have used this candidate as a value check raise on the turn because
Hmm.
I would expect Rob to bet the flop with an eight. So
Right.
when Rob checks the flop and bets the turn, I think he's more likely to have a five or a straight draw or a flush draw. So I want to use this top pair, top kicker to raise for value.
You can see Rob really wanted to get called with those queens there.
Yeah. And also, as you can see in this match as well, I mean, DFS has definitely been running a little bit hot, but DFS has been using a lot of consistent aggression, much more so
Hmm.
than Rob has been doing. And we can see that he's winning a lot of pots without that much um, without it being contested too much by Rob. Like Rob full and ace high earlier. Um, he's missed a couple check raise spots. And all of these spots are like, I'm not saying these are easy to play. They're very difficult and very awkward to play, but that's just how heads up plays. Heads up just plays awkward and
Mm.
difficult the entire time.
Yep. Well, and I like to say, they stopped making good hands like after the top few. Like most of the hands you're going to play are not good hands. And so
Yeah, exactly.
the natural bluffs are the semi bluffs where you've got
Yeah.
draw equity or blocker value. When you're in heads up like this, you have to expand that range
Yeah.
and play with some counterintuitive
Yeah,
bluffing
exactly.
candidates. And that's hard to get your head around, I think, for a lot of
The other thing
recreational
as
players.
well, when you're thinking about it, is part of the reason why we get to bet so thin for value and heads up is because we're bluffing so often.
Right.
The more you're bluffing, the thinner you have to bet for value. That's just how theory works. You want to value
Hmm.
bet really loose, you need to bluff a lot. You want to bluff a lot, you need to value bet really loose. And heads up is just lots and lots of bluffing. It also means it's lots and lots and lots of value bets. Like for
Yep.
instance, this is a great spot where as Rob, he should be betting this fairly large just because this is a pretty dynamic board, hits both players really well. And then DFS here should be check raising this for value. Like
Yep.
this hand is more than strong enough to check raise for value, bet this turn card, jam the river, get called, and be happy that you chopped essentially.
That's which is what I sense is coming. It'll be, oh, I guess the only someone could fold, I guess, is the
Yeah.
way that this could go. But
So what?
doesn't,
Check call, check call. Okay, so here's a
yeah.
perfect example of a spot where Rob with this 10-9 can use an overpot size. And the reason why is look at all the draws at brick.
Yeah.
Queen Jack, Queen 9, Jack 9, Jack 7, 9 7, 9 6, 6 7. Those are all straight draws at brick. And DFS didn't tell him that he had a better hand. DFS should be check raising, queen 10 all day on flop. So on the river, not only is Rob supposed to bet his hand, but he actually has a really good overpot candidate, which he just checked it back. And like that's the type of aggression that you can't really miss heads up, because if you're not betting those hands for value, then it's actually very easy to be bluffing too much.
That's a great point. And then you get kind of you get overbalanced the other way.
Yeah. Or if you're not bluffing enough, then not only are you not going for value enough, you're not bluffing enough, in which case you just get grinded down really quickly.
Yeah. Ryan, there's a petition in the chat for you to sing "Everyone Loves a Chop Pot." Are you going to let down Rec Poker Nation?
If it happens again, I'll do it. Third time's
Okay. That's a very Jim-like attitude. I'll throw some bread to the geese here for a second.
yeah.
Everyone loves a chop pot. There. That's
There
like
you go.
it's Oscar worthy. I want to see some awards for some of the vocal performances that we've done here at MaREC Madness over the years. They're
So it looks
singing.
like
They're singing in the
Rob,
chat. This is a hell of a group we got here.
looks like Rob bet the river somewhat large, and DFX actually has a pretty easy call with the deuce because Rob hasn't been going thin for value at all. So a deuce there is actually beats all of the bluffs, and Rob's kind of representing really, really good value hands only.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's like one of the other downsides of not playing like white aggressive enough, is you actually end up having these polar ranges more often. So earlier what I was mentioning, it's easy to overbluff. Very, very, very easy to.
That's great stuff. You've got some fans in the YouTube chat, loving the commentary, by the way. You're really putting some really helpful, applicable advice out here for recreational players. So you
Try
should
to
do
do
this
my
for a
best.
living, man. You should do this for a
Yeah,
living.
maybe I should. Good thing to do. Something I would enjoy. So actually, DFS there, actually his queen 9 is pretty good call. Because like Rob's representing an ace or worse, and he beats all the worst.
Yep. Yeah, that's actually one of the things we were talking about, visualizing ranges. And, but before the real solvers came out, I think Flopzilla was far and away the best
Yeah.
tool for visualizing it. And I like one of the things about Octopi is it kind of takes that same interface where it shows you the buckets of hands, the different
Yeah.
hand strengths, and then you can kind of use those to see what portions of the range they are, and it's a really good visual aid.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Definitely.
a lot of the other solvers aren't grouped like that. They have the same grid and they have the same kind of quadrant, but they don't bucket the hands like that. And I think that really helps us visualize.
They can. Most of them do. It's just it can be kind of hard to find and also a little bit harder to visualize the way that Octopi does.
Mm.
This sounds kind of interesting. Since
Hmm.
DFS bet the turn, he now is actually pretty incentivized to bluff this river card. And Rob just got this really bad run out for his 6-5.
Yep. And you can see he's hating it. He's not enjoying the prospect. But I think, and like Rob, I think is one of these players that like he's very confident in his game. He doesn't want to make a big mistake. He's going to be overfolding in some of these 50-50 spots. When like
The
is that
issue
some
with doing that
yes,
is when you
please.
do it even a little too often, which is very easy to do heads up, you're no longer have that edge that you think you have because you gave it up.
Yep.
So like Rob's trying to like lower his volatility by passing on these thin spots, but actually all
Mm,
he's doing, he's decreasing his edge, which is increasing volatility. He's
that's
actually
good.
having the opposite effect because each of these bluff catches, like there's been like 3 or 4 spots that he could have taken, and he actually took one of the few that I actually would have folded in because it's kind of an incongruent story by our opponent. I want to call in the spots where opponents telling a somewhat consistent story. That's when I want to bluff catch because it's hard to have really good hands when your opponent's like, "Hey, I probably have this. Hey, I probably have this. Hey, I probably have this." But it's easy to have a good hand when your opponent's all of a sudden betting really large on a card that's good.
Right. I like that.
That's like probably one of the easiest ways to think about it, which is this card really good for me? Oh, it is. Why is my opponent betting? Oh, is
Right.
this card really good for my opponent? Okay, of course they're going to be bluffing a lot here.
Yep. And again, that's very, villain dependent. well, and again, that's one of the most important things that we're going to encounter is the assumptions that we make about our opponents
Yep.
and like what level
I,
they're
I
on.
feel as though these things are super common though.
Yeah,
Like the ones that I'm talking about are ones I tend to see the most frequently, and are the ones that I expect people to make pretty consistently, and are how I build a lot of my exploits around.
cool.
So if you want to think in terms of increasing hand strength by like 3 notches, eights heads up is like jacks or queens,
Hmm.
3 or 4 notches higher. So I'd be often 3 betting this.
Yes. And we are in that kind of we're in that stack depth, that those 30 to 35 big blinds, which is a really awkward three betting
Yeah.
stack depth. You're almost putting a lot of your chips in play, but you don't necessarily want to get all of them in.
Well, and I mean, eights heads up is a stack off. Like I'm three
Sure.
betting to snap off a jam, which
Hmm.
is, kind of how I'd play pocket queens and pocket jacks on 30 bigs in a tournament. I
You've
was three
promoted
betting to
them.
call a
Yeah.
jam.
Yeah. Nice.
So in this case, we are playing for stacks, and we're doing it very happily because, like with eights, I 3 bet my opponent jams 30 bigs. I expect to see deuces. And if
Yep.
I expect to see a hand that's 6 notches lower, that means my hand is going to run like 55, 60% equity, which I mean, that's a big edge. It's a massive
It
edge.
sure is. It sure is. And that's the real key, right? Because they're definitely shoving their pairs higher than eights, and they're also
Yeah.
which you're not doing very well against, and they're also shoving a lot of unpaired overcards.
Yep.
And so it's important that you're dominating some portion of that shoving range in order for you to have above average equity going into it.
And DFS definitely plays aggressive enough where, if we were to use a hand like pocket eights as a 3 bet, I would expect him to have a hand like pocket deuces as a jam.
Yep.
And as
And
we can see, Rob's been playing this kind of cautious style. He's been more aggressive than Eric is, but he's still been like overly cautious yet. And
hmm,
DFS is consistent aggression. Like essentially the stack difference that we're seeing right here. DFS is up like 13 big blinds above parity, which I don't know exactly how many hands in we are, but we're probably like 40-ish hands in, 30-ish hands
yep.
in. And if each one of those small pots was like him just gaining half a big blind, that's a 13 big blind edge.
Yep, that's a great way to think about it. And it's again, stacking those little edges,
Yep.
winning those little pots, taking those spots that are just slightly more profitable than passing on them. That's the only way to be well. It's a good way to be successful
Yeah. Very good way to
in
be,
this
of
game.
course. Like this is a pretty good spot to just use this hand as a check call. Bottom pair again, it's more likely a mid
Hmm.
pair, middle-ish pair. And actually, a lot of people kind of use these like low card like pairs with a blocker wrong. They'll use them as a check raise instead of using lower cards. Like you want to use a hand like Jack Deuce
Hmm.
as a call because you can turn a Jack, which your opponent's going to barrel on. And actually, not surprising to see DFS fold on that turn barrel. Like Rob hasn't been that aggressive, and all of a sudden Rob pushed this aggression, and DFS snap folded that pair, which is very reasonable by him. Rob is turning a hand with good showdown actually into a bluff that he doesn't need to, but he gets a fold from a hand that probably shouldn't really fold to a second barrel because
Yeah.
he's been on this tighter side of things.
Yep.
And while it's good to see that, it's hard for him to be doing enough of it in order to make up for the fact that he's been a bit too tight and a bit too cautious.
So one question I had for you is that a lot of the times when because we do a lot of the Wrecking Crew members offer coaching to our premium members through a bunch of different programs here at Rec Poker. And one of the big consistent leaks that we see is players playing way too tight and passively, limping, folding on the button when it folds around to them and they have the option to take like the most profitable spot in all of poker, stuff like that. Um, how do we if you're a less experienced player and you're trying to inject some aggression into your game, what's the way that we can kind of like rationalize that to them where it makes the upset not such a devastating thing? Because like, yeah, you're gonna lose hands that you put money in, but like in the long run, it's more profitable. Is
Right.
there
You
a
need
way into that?
to try to convince them that like, playing is really about making good decisions because you have no control over winning and losing pots.
Hmm.
And each time you make a bad decision, that's what should upset you. Whether you win
Hmm.
a pot, it's just luck. One hand is luck. And if you're making good decisions, the better decisions you're making and the more consistently you're making them, the higher your win rate, the more money you're going to make, the more pots you're going to win. And that's really all it comes down to. Better decisions equates to better win rates, equates to lower variance, equates to more pots won, which since people like to win pots and win tournaments and win money, that can be more fun.
Yep. I do think there's this emphasis on like winning pots or like winning hands. And that's really just a byproduct of making good
Yeah.
decisions. What you should be trying to do is just win all the chips. That's
Yeah.
really the most important thing. And here we got diamonds over diamonds on a paired board. We'll see. I expect Scott's gonna fire here. Just
Yeah.
because this
This
is kind of a hard board to continue on.
this could definitely be a pretty big pot. I would expect Rob to check call this just based off how he's been playing in general, but I
Yep.
would definitely use the Jack Deuce of Diamonds. Ooh, oh, what a turn card. Oh, this is ugly.
Yeah. So we get the relatively small bet from Scott. He's really just trying to get some value here. And we get the smooth call from Rob with the
Wow.
better flush. So 8 on the river. We get a check from Rob, and let's see how Scott responds. Almost certain to see a bet here. Now, if you're in Rob's shoes, assuming Scott, and there's the bet, a little over bet, in fact, an insta call from Rob. Okay, I was wondering if he bet smaller
I
if a
would
raise was in play
jam the
here.
river for sure as
Yeah,
Rob, even versus overpot. You have to jam this.
yeah.
Again, if you're not, betting and raising your hands for value, where are you winning pots?
Hmm. And I think, and is it, should we just be less worried about things like kicker problems and higher flushes heads up because the
Yeah,
ranges
because
start
like,
so wide?
a jack high flush heads up. It's like he has a full house there.
Right.
Why wouldn't he jam a full house?
Yeah, because we're promoting, we're moving all
Yeah.
our hands up in
The
value.
other thing too is like he check called. Like he has a flush in a spot he's not supposed to have a flush. Not only does he
Mm,
have a flush, he has one of the best flushes possible. So like it doesn't really matter that your opponent bet really large on the river. You just like you have a monster hand. And here, like, he coolers his opponent in this like really big way. And instead of doubling up, he doesn't.
hmm.
Which again, if you're missing out on value in these types of spots, where is your edge?
Yep.
Like you can't play cautiously. Like it's like there's a really good saying that something along the lines of don't let perfection get in the way of good.
Yeah.
And Rob's trying to like play in this like cautious way because he like thinks he has this like edge against his opponent that's playing really aggressively, but he's missing the point of this opponent's playing really aggressively. I need to be playing back at him. I need to be valuing my hands correctly. I need to be building these pots with my good hands. I need to be reapplying pressure, which these are all common mistakes that people make.
Hmm. Now, personally, Ryan, I know other people like to study and get good at poker. I just like to flop sets and just like make hands and just, run way above EV. As I know it's not for everybody, but it's been successful for me so far, and I've really been enjoying
I mean, it's
that.
poker is definitely more fun when you're running hot. As I know, for the last couple months, I had my largest score ever in December. Then right after,
Yeah, man.
before it, I had deep run in the big 600, big deep run in big 1100. My largest score ever. Had another final table. Had another final table. Had a stream poker go final table recently, and that just makes like each one just makes a really like huge difference, of course, in my results. Yet the difference between my playing right now and my play during the summer, in which I got demolished, was I just ran well when it mattered.
Yeah, yeah,
And
it's
it's
true.
a $600,000 swing.
Yeah, yeah. And congratulations
And
on the recent
thank
score,
you,
by the way. I know
appreciate it.
you've been all
Yeah, I've been
over it
running
lately.
hot.
Good for you. Yeah.
Poker's a lot of fun when you run hot. Tournaments in general are just wonderful when you run hot.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Scott can't get paid with the aces, but he did pick up a decent little pot there. now with Rob Washam 10-7 of hearts on the button, and he's likely going to make an open. See if he does. Now this is, oh, and I should show, there we go, two big blinds, and we see Scott with 6-2 offsuit and might find the muck here. I want to give a shout out to Poker Now. This is the platform that we're watching all these matches on. They've been around for several years. It's a free poker playing platform. It's fantastic. You can have camera action. You can play with your friends. One person has to be the host. Other people don't even have an account to join. You can just sort of sign up, or one of you can sign up, share the link with your friends, and then you can get a whole crowd of people in here playing, all with your cameras on, with your microphones on, having a really social experience in a free poker playing platform. So and I want to thank Poker Now and Samuel for putting this stuff together for us, because we use this program in a lot of our training material, and it's a fantastic tool and a fun way to play.
So I'm sure you'd be like, oh, Ryan's probably never heard of this platform. He's probably never played on it. He's probably never done anything like that. I've actually been playing on this for like 4 years, maybe 3 years.
Really? In what
Yeah.
context?
So I've my friends from college back up in Minnesota. We started a poker league, at our college, and we play these, weekly tournaments on Sunday, and it was a full semester long league. Anyways, those guys, I still play poker with them somewhat regularly. If I'm back up in Minnesota and I have time to get together, we'll get together and play in person.
That's
But
awesome.
we'll play online on Poker Now, actually.
That's
Not
so
super
cool.
often, anywhere between like they play more often than I'm able to. They probably play, once every month or once every other month or something like that. I probably play with them, between 1 and 5 times a year, depending on just whether my schedule lines up or not.
That's so great, man. And so you
Yeah.
actually have that point of connection with these friends. And it's through, like, this is one of the things I love about poker, right? Like, it actually is,
Yep.
I mean, it's an exciting, wonderful, strategic, stimulating game on its own right, but it's also just a great excuse to get together and hang out and
Yep.
like catch up with people. It's a very
Yeah.
social
So,
game.
as 18, 19, 20-year olds at UMD, we had a like 25 person poker league where everyone put in like $40 and we played it for the whole semester.
Yeah.
Like literally, 3, 4 month of weekly games. And all those people, they're still, some of my at least
Mm,
better, best friends from college, but still like pretty good friends now. A couple of my friends from then are some of my, best friends that I have.
that's amazing. Good for you. I know I've got some good friends from like junior school and high school and college. Like I know not a lot of people do. We're lucky to be able to
Yep.
have that group, that intimacy, that friendship that goes back so many years.
That 10-8, 10-6 hand is actually a pretty decent sized cooler.
Mm,
Um, DFS definitely missed some value on the river. I would say something that I've seen DFS pretty consistently make as a mistake, super common mistake, is he sees this like single overcard hit, and in his mind, he's going, "Oh, I can't get value now from my hand." But
hmm.
really, that's not an important card. It wasn't a card that's going to hit Rob's check call range unless he just happened to have Jack 3, Jack deuce, Jack 4, or happen to have 10-9 or Queen 10. He actually had a pretty clear value bet, and he would have gotten called not just by a worse 10, but he gets called by a 4 there all the time. He gets called by a 3
Sure.
there all the time.
Yep.
And Rob has been somewhat sticky in enough spots where DFS can comfortably go for value in those spots, and just didn't in that situation. And he didn't even think about it. And that's more like, I would say, is like almost a larger mistake, is he just made a snap decision instead of going,
Mm,
oh, can I bet for value here? And since he didn't think about it, he made a very clear mistake.
yep. And actually, Rob Washam, that's something he says all the time is, use your time bank. Like, just take your hand off the mouse. Just don't make
Yeah.
any snap decisions. Think through your options, because I don't know about you, but like when I get into it, especially
Yeah.
heads up, you're playing every hand, you click, 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 click. Like I do get it, kind of like an autopilot kicks in. That
Yeah.
can be the
Like we
enemy
just
for
saw
sure.
Rob there just fold the king six to an open. And it was like a snap
Right.
fold too. He didn't really think about it.
Yeah.
And I
All
think
right.
if
So,
he thinks about it, he probably would have not folded his hand.
yeah.
Because like this ace three versus three bet is a worse hand than the king six was versus the open. And DFS
Interesting.
actually folds that king queen in a spot where he's going to be flipping most of the time for his Rob's
Yep.
shut. just because Rob got so short.
Mm-hmm.
This is why you don't really want to use those types of hands as three bets unless you're three betting to call off in this type of situation because of how shallow you are. You know, it's one thing when you're deeper effective where you can three bet fold because your opponent's range is so strong. But there, when your opponent's range has a lot of flips, you can't three bet and fold it. You have to three bet and commit with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Tough to do, but it's the only way.
Yep.
Um, and I can tell if you, I don't know if like looking at the body language of the two players, I just from looking at them, Scott is kind of like he's in this same sort of stoic position, but Rob just feels he's giving off like frustrated vibes. Like I'm
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
at him and like I feel like he's not in a positive headspace, and that
Yeah,
that
I
that
would,
can be a problem too.
and I feel as though that's been leading to some of those mistakes. Like he folded the button with 8-6 there. I mean, he should know that that's a hand that he gets to play. But he's frustrated. He's shorter stack. He's like more focused on that stuff instead of just playing good heads up poker.
Now, I will say he can cockroach like the best of them. He was playing against Kim Kilroy a couple rounds ago, and Kim had him down to like 9 or 10 big blinds a couple times, and he clawed his way back up. So he's no stranger to using that short stack. So hopefully he'll have something to smile about soon and
Which
get
it's
back
definitely
in.
important to be like, in full ring tournaments, it's much more important of a skill to be able to grind through those short and medium stacks. To be able to play a 7 to like 15 big blind stack carefully and comfortably, especially in ICM spots, super important. But in heads up, you can't do that. You'll just get
Hmm.
blinded down.
Hmm. And
So
you're not
even
laddering up and stuff too.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, that makes point. That makes
Like
sense.
each time he's making these folds, he's giving his opponent a better opportunity to win.
Yep. Now, when Scott limps the button there, Rob's got ace five suited with about 12 or 13 big blinds.
Same
Is that a
thing. He
shove?
needs to be raising this. Yeah,
Yeah.
he can. This hand's strong enough to raise and call a jam with
Yeah.
on 12 bigs. And when you check it, like your opponent, when they limp the button, they're actually supposed to be having this like kind of polar raising range. So they're actually have a lot of hands with good playability. So
Yep.
when you don't raise, you're allowing your opponent to just see the flop for free with hands that hit really well. And he lost a pot that he should have won.
Hmm. Speaking of which, while we were reminiscing, I've been told that we missed a chopped pot, Ryan. I'm
Oh,
just
did we?
that's what they're saying in the chat. Yeah, is it time?
Well, I didn't see it, so it doesn't count. Count. If it happens again and I see it.
Okay, there. I'm only taking their word for it because I was paying attention to our story as well. So fair enough. Let's see. I think we can get there. I think we can get there. Fingers crossed. Because people don't want to hear me. Listen, man, they've heard it from this guy enough. It's not an
Enough.
impressive performance.
So even here with this King 7, like Rob could have raised it pre-flop.
Yeah.
And actually, DFS here had a really good river bluff spot that he didn't take.
Hmm.
It's a great, great, great bluff spot. The 4 flush is wonderful. Rob folding the button there with a hand as strong as 8-5, like you're just going to get grinded down. All of these hands, like you can't fold the button when you're getting that good of odds in position.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying so even if you're not going to open with it, limp it
You can't fold it. Yeah,
and
you're getting 3
VPIP
to
it.
1 odds
Yeah.
and you're in position. Why would you fold anything?
Yeah. Yeah.
All hands are good at that point.
That's
Just
right.
some hands are really good.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like just mathematically speaking, what you're saying is that
Yeah.
literally every combo of hands
Yeah, it's a good hand.
has the appropriate equity
Yeah. Yeah,
given the
exactly.
pot odds that you're getting.
Deuce
Yeah,
7 offsuit. Easy call.
yeah,
Or
yeah,
raise.
yeah. And here we get. I like this. We've got the flush draw. He does have the pair there with it, so it does kind of put Scott in a
Oh,
tricky
that's a
spot.
big shove.
Yeah, and it looks drawier. Like having the pair is actually like the pair plus draw. Now, let me ask you about that, Ryan. So the pair plus draw is this weird spot where it's like, okay, if he has a bigger pair, I can outdraw. If he's on a
Yeah.
higher draw, I've got the pair. Is that a spot that you'd like to see people be more
Yeah, I
aggressive
definitely
with?
want to see aggression there, but I want to see him played in a way where his opponent can easily put it in with worse hands. I have
Mm,
to see a way
hmm.
in which our opponent can check raise a straight draw, can check raise bottom pair, can check call bottom pair, can check call king high and queen high.
Yep.
And like on the flop there, we definitely do want to bet because on the flop, that pair and flush draw is a really strong hand. Like it's actually a good value hand when we're that short. But now if we had turned a pair, then I'm going to check it back because our hand is no longer as strong when we don't have that extra street to hit our flush or hit our two pair or hit trips.
Very cool. Now I noticed in some of our matches, some of our players started just open shoving around 12, 13, 14 big blinds. I think part of it's to avoid difficult decisions. Like we
Yeah.
want to make what we know is like a break even or better play because it means we don't make a mistake later. Um, you said you min open right down to 3 or 4 or 5 big
Yeah, I
blinds.
mean, I would have open jams, but they would be like the hands you would expect. Like I'd shove small mid pairs. I'd shove like, the weaker offsuit ace X, some of the like suited middling to weak king X. But for the
Mhm.
most part, I'm mostly raise folding. I'm mostly limping
Yep.
because as we can see, uh, each player we've seen today have all been making those same types of mistakes where they're just not being aggressive enough versus a raise. They're not being aggressive enough versus C bet. And even our most aggressive players still haven't been.
Yes.
Oh, what a monster flop here for
I know,
DFS.
right? Like, oh my God, Scott just can't. He's not going to get the value for it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think if he'd put a bet on the turn, I think he might have gotten.
Yeah, he would have gotten called on the turn for sure. And
Yeah, and
actually,
now
as
it's
him, I would have bet the turn for sure.
now it's easy for us to say seeing all the cards, but I think the flow of the game also that
Yeah.
feels like a good spot to take it.
So Queen 10 here on 11. This is the type of hand that I'd actually, in general, be limping
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to raise call off with it, and you don't really
Right.
want to raise fold it.
Yep.
As you can see, he's immediately makes that face. That means you made a mistake pre-flop when you're like that pained.
Yep.
Decisions at
That's
the
right.
stacked up, even at this shallow effective, you should be happily raise calling or happily raise folding.
Otherwise, limping
Yeah,
and
otherwise that's what the limp is for.
yeah. And I do think that's a really underrated point. Like people think about ranges as though they're kind of like top down and there's only one way to go with them. But every opening range should have some hands that you're going to open and call, some hands you're going to open and fold, some hands you're going to open and re-raise too. And it's
Yeah,
just, raising and then folding doesn't mean that you made a mistake as
yeah,
long as it was part of the plan.
yeah, exactly. When you raise and go, oops, this sucks. What am I
That's
supposed to
right.
do? That's when you know you made a mistake. And that's actually true in not only these like pre-flop heads up spots, just like, you bet the river in a spot and and you have an opponent that is good, aggressive, and capable, and they raise
Right.
and you're annoyed. Now there are plenty of spots where you should be betting and folding to a raise all the time on the river. But when it's against good aggressive players, that's when you shouldn't be that uncertain. Oh,
Hmm. And here we go. This could be the hand. DFS brackets in there with ace king suited against pocket tens. Will the tens hold? They hold. And how about that? Rob gets the crucial double up and is at 25 big blinds. We got the Somsky ratio back to 2. It is officially anyone's game. A lot of chicken left on that bone, as my dad would say.
that's a good thing.
Yeah. Now expect we'll see the 3 bet from Rob, and we do.
Yeah. Jacks here, of course. Very good hand. We
And I
haven't seen
guess
Rob really three bet.
yes, which
And
I'm a
that's
little
almost,
surprised. I thought
yeah.
we'd see more of that from Rob in this setup.
We've been seeing him check a lot with hands like these ace X out of position,
Hmm.
which Rob essentially what we can tell is Rob going into this had this plan of playing this very controlled and careful style, expecting DFS to play like way too loose aggressive. What a
Oh wow! Surely
brutal
this
river
is
start.
the end of it. I mean, we've got top and bottom for Rob, and Scott has rivered the wheel. Goes. Oh, I guess it starts. Everyone checked to get there.
Yeah.
Now we got to see another raise from Scott here. I think when Rob makes
When he
the
has the stone nutter butters. Yeah.
Right. And note the sizing too. He really wants
Yep.
to get called and will. And look at Rob's
Yeah.
reaction. He's getting pissed. He's, I love Rob. I feel bad for him because he's ended up on the wrong end of a few of these. But I
Yeah,
mean,
he's definitely been getting coolered a lot here. But when you're playing overly cautiously, a lot of how this match should have gone is him getting kind of grinded down. And then if he had just gotten, cooler once in like one of these medium-sized pots, he just
hmm
loses a lot.
hmm
Um, Especially like there's some spots that DFS can push some value a little bit tougher. But if you're on the opposite side of this, if you're playing more like how DFS is, you're consistently aggressive, you can afford more of these coolers. You can afford to lose
yes.
more of these flips because then you'll still have chips from all these other pots you won.
Yeah.
Speaking of coolers,
Oh my God. Yeah. This this all right. I find that I'm obviously I'm rooting for the underdog in every spot here. I'm like, come on, Rob, you can get that too. I like Scott too, but like I gotta root for
oh,
the underdog. Oh, there it is. Wow. I feel responsible for that. Sorry, Scott. That was on me. That was on me, DFS Brett. And yeah, we got a smile up on Rob's camera there. There you
yeah, that'll
go.
make him pretty happy.
Yeah, exactly. The Somsky ratio is down to less than two. Oh my. Look at him. He's having a great time now.
So I would say one other thing, like unless like the fact that you've been surprised about how Rob's playing too, really
Hmm.
says that he went in with the plan. And I would say based off of just like what we've kind of been seeing, is that he's over sticking to this plan.
Hmm.
That when you're losing so many pots and so many pots and spots where it should have been pretty clear that he could have won this if he had used a little of aggression, then that's when you like kind of change your plan a bit. Obviously, it's kind of
Hmm.
hard to do that in game, but like when I sit down to play, especially when I'm playing heads up, but if I just sit down to play in general, well, most of the time I have a plan of how I'm going to play versus most of my opponents, and what I'm going to be opening, when I'm going to be three betting and that type of stuff. I'm constantly adjusting. Like if someone who's mostly limping, all of a sudden they 3x, I'm not going to 3 bet them with ace jack.
Yep.
Or if they're mostly min opening and they 4x, I'm not going to 3 bet them with jacks.
Hmm.
And that's just me taking the information I'm getting and adjusting based on how my opponents are playing. Now, yeah, my overall plan is going to be similar. I'm generally going to be opening loose. I'm generally going to be 3 betting loose opens. I'm generally going to be c betting a lot. But my opponents are giving me this information. I'm taking that information. I'm constantly adjusting with it. So I'll have one player I'm playing really loose aggressive with pre-flop, one player I'm playing more tight aggressive with, one player I'm playing a little bit more passive versus because of their size or so on and so forth. Constantly shifting my play.
And that's the way sophisticated players, again, it's another edge. It's another small edge that we're adding into the game here. Um, Ryan, how much do you, and outside of the heads up dynamic, how much does that affect your opening ranges when you look left and there's such and such a player on the button or there's such and such a player in the big blind?
Pretty big amount. So like give an idea, button opening range in theory is usually between 45 and 55%.
Sure.
If I see one weak player in the big blind who's under 3 betting, and even if the small blind's like a good professional, I'm still going to be opening like 80% of hands.
Hmm.
Now, both players I've seen are, maybe one player is a tight aggressive, okay pro, and the big blind is just tight passive. I'm opening 100% of hands.
Hmm.
In fact, if say both players are recreational players and neither are very aggressive, not only am I opening any 2 cards, but you could not give me cards and I'd still want to open.
Yeah.
Like that's how badly I want to open is I could just not have cards in front of me and I would still want to raise.
Yeah.
And the reason why is the main thing that's going to happen is you'd mentioned someone earlier, these bread and butter spots, heads up in position as the opener, a c-bet opportunity. It's where
Yep.
it's where a lot of your money gets made in tournaments. And a lot of these spots, this is how profitable a lot of them are, is full zero button, you open, big blind defense, flop comes whatever, and you c-bet a quarter pot. The vast majority of those spots, you can c-bet there without cards in your hand, where when your opponent calls or raises, you automatically forfeit the pot because you don't have cards. It is still profitable to c-bet there. And it's
Yeah.
so profitable to c-bet there that you actually can make over 100% return on your investment in that spot without cards in your hand. That's
That's
how profitable.
amazing. That's amazing.
That's why
How?
like you always want to be looking for these c-bet opportunities. So when you're not
Yes.
like completing the button enough, or for these heads up spots, Rob's been missing a lot of these c-bet opportunities. He's because he hasn't been completing the button enough, he hasn't been raising enough, he hasn't been raising out position enough, so he's missing all of these c-bet opportunities. And DFS has just been using this consistent aggression where he's winning pot after pot after pot. And that's just where the win is going to come in a lot of these games, is from this consistency.
Mhm.
And DFS has taken some pretty big beats and lost some pretty big flips and all that type of stuff. And he still has this large lead. And based off how he's playing, he should have a somewhat large lead at this point in the event. They're played 130 hands, it looks like.
Mhm.
This consistent aggression should be winning him this event a decent amount of time. The longer this goes, the more likely he is to win.
Yep. And we do see him making a lot of these like semi-bluff raises,
Mhm.
using adding fold equity to his draws. And the nice thing about that is that often your opponent folds and you just win the pot there, but it's a
Yeah, like
backup plan. Even when
with
they
that
don't,
four
now
or
you've got
five,
equity.
like he
Yeah.
got
Yeah,
second pair to fold in a spot that second pair should be happily calling. He
totally.
turned a hand with some equity into a hand with all of the equity in a
Hmm.
spot where Rob should have been continuing.
Yep. And you can Rob starting to, I saw an open shove there with ace five off. So we got a limp from
Which,
Scott with pocket queens, and Rob does not take the bait.
which that like jam with the ace five, it's a pretty big jam. Like he's not really getting called by worse hands. That's why you don't really want to
Hmm.
shove in those spots. And
Um,
DFS actually
yeah.
trapping these hands, like we've seen him do some other spots. Rob hasn't been taking the bait. Rob hasn't been aggressive. So why is DFS setting these traps?
Satan's board.
Like these are actually pretty consistent mistakes I've seen DFS play. He's been like going, "Oh, I'm playing so aggressive. I'm bluffing so much. I'm gonna, play kind of like trappy occasionally with my good hands because I want to be this like, hard to play versus player." But all he's doing is Rob's not attacking them.
Yeah.
So why are you doing that?
I do think sometimes recreational players, we worry more about strengthening our weak ranges than we do about weakening our value ranges. Like
Yeah.
generally, we're better off bluffing more and also playing our strong hands strongly rather than like protecting our check back range and
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the
Which,
players we're playing against aren't taking
yeah,
advantage of it in the right way.
exactly. And DFS keeps like trying to do that because he knows he's kind of supposed to, but he has an opponent who's not taking advantage of it. So just
Hmm.
keep playing your good hands for what they're worth, and then just keep bluffing because your opponent's letting you.
You said something earlier about how profitable it was to be able to c bet in one of those single raise pots while you're in position with
Yeah.
the aggression. I think about this from sometimes. What do you think is a more profitable spot? It folds to you on the button and you get to open, or your typical bread and butter c bet spot? And are those the two, in your opinion, are those the two
I
like
mean,
most
it's kind of
profitable spots?
this. It's very similar. Obviously, the c bet spot's better because in the button spot, first of all, you even though you did get folded to, that's like step one. You know, you still are going to get dealt a bad hand, 70% of the time, essentially. And your opponents are going to be able to three betting you and that type of stuff. While in the spot where you get that c bet opportunity, you already got the important thing, which was getting to that flop c bet spot. So you could tell me I have a flop c bet spot where I didn't hit the flop, but it's a pretty good bluff opportunity, or it
Hmm.
folds me on the button, and I would still take the c bet spot over.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
That's how good it is.
Now, how do you get to be able to make that c-bet? By opening and not by
Yeah, by
limping,
opening.
and
Yep, exactly.
so stack those profitable edges. And this is what I tell folks. They're limping or they're just not comfortable playing that wide range of hands. It
And
leads to other profitable spots
yeah,
later in the hand.
exactly. And if you want to get comfortable playing these things, which pretty much everyone watching this easily can, if you don't want to spend any money, go to our school link. Taylor can post it again. So for those of you who weren't here earlier, you can check it out, entirely free. Also, if you want to really get down to the nitty gritty, like I said, we teamed up with Octopi or Deal Ends tomorrow. You really will not find many better deals. I would argue it's one of the best deals in the industry right now. And you get a little bit of everything. You get some training videos on how to apply this theory, get one of the best study tools in the market, in my opinion, the best study tool in the market. And on top of that, you get access to PokerGo for a year for a very good price. And if all this stuff sounds like it's a little bit complex, a little bit tough for you in this type of context, I can make it nice and simple and easy for you.
That's right. Nice and simple and easy, like getting it all in with pocket nines. Now let's see if Rob can hold against the DFS brat with ace jack. Oh, wow, that's a persuasive turn card. And I love the spot where it's like they even give Scott the ace on the river just to max pain the guy, like just to twist the knife. It's
Just
like
to
you
twist
weren't
it
going to
in.
need that. You weren't going to need that ace later in the match. Let's just give it to you now. Rough, rough poker gods, rough play. So Rob, yeah, I told you, he knows how to cockroach, man. He's gonna get that single digit big blind stack back up into danger territory here. He knows how to do it.
Here's another really good example. Like DFS limps the ace seven and then folds it to the jam, which he should
Yeah.
just be like raising it because Rob hasn't really been reapplying this pressure.
Hmm. Now Rob might put a stab out here on the turn because yes, I mean we do see him going almost pot. He's got some draw equity, but queen high he doesn't think is necessarily going to win and gets to pick up another small pot.
See this out of position bluffs with the queen high, that I'm more in favor of. In position, you can
Hmm.
just get to the river. Out of position,
Yeah.
you're trying to more make something happen. You're trying to get to the river. You're trying to apply pressure. You're trying to do these other things.
Yep. Now I think this might be we might be getting as Rob gets closer and closer. Oh, interesting spot here. So Rob's got the up and down, and DFS Brat has the trips. I
Yeah,
think
definitely
Rob's
a bit of a cooler spot because like he has just a really good draw and running into trips is
yes.
unlucky. And
Yes,
he
it
does
goes
go
for
for the
the
check raise.
and we'll see. I kind of like the smooth call here from DFS Brat. With the stack depth, what it is, you don't have to go crazy. But what a turn. Oh
What
God.
an ugly turn card.
Oh yeah. Now let's anything just the board pairing. Oh, and of course I had to speak it into existence. Rob Washam, good game, a great match. Scott Beckham, welcome to the finals of MaREC Madness. Holy cow. So it's going to be, oh God, it's Eric Jin, right? Eric won the first one. Oh, I get a couple hours into this. I just start getting fried. But Eric Jin, congratulations. You are going to be playing against Scott DFS Brad Beckham in the final round. Now, I'll just tell our listeners next week we're going to be doing this again on Tuesday night. It is a best 2 out of 3 for the finals. So one bad beat isn't going to do it. So we'll see at least 2 matches, maybe 3. And we're going to have another fantastic, exciting guest joining me in the booth. Ryan, such a pleasure, man. Like you're so generous with your time. You're such a gifted coach, and the way that you speak about poker, you obviously love it. You're so steeped in it. It's I can tell why you spend all your time on this, man. You're so good at this. Thank you so much for being a big part of what we do here. This was a treat.
Thank you for supporting me. I really do appreciate it. I'm glad I've been able to work with such a great group as Rec Poker. Obviously, as someone that I care deeply about the game and the industry, I love seeing others that care about it in the same way that I do. One of the reasons why I coach so much is because I want others to understand and appreciate the game in the same type of way that I do. And while, like you say, I'm a really good coach, part of the reason why I'm a really good coach is because I wasn't someone that was like supernaturally gifted as like a poker player
Mm,
when I got started. So I had to
mm,
really work hard to build up these fundamentals. And I did what everyone else does, which is I learned from players that I really like and respect a lot and use that as a means to improve. So a lot of the stuff that I teach, it's stuff that I've learned from Galfond videos, stuff I've learned from Jason Kuhn articles, it's stuff from I learned from Ike Caxton interviews and training videos and from solver work and all that type of stuff. And I've just been consistent with it. And that's really all it takes is that consistency. So if you're someone that
mm,
plays like recreationally, and all the stuff that I've been talking about seems like it's too complex for you, well, if you're studying an hour a week, that's all you really need to start working on those fundamental foundations to go from this stuff being a little bit difficult to being easy to understand. And maybe you get to a point where you're playing more consistently, up into 2 hours a week. And
mhm.
that can really be all you need in terms of really to improve your game a lot. And even if you don't have like enough time to, study seriously for an hour, maybe you could, watch a video on Poker Go for 30 minutes while you're going to the bathroom. And then, a couple days later, watch a 30-minute training video on Learn Pro Poker. There are different ways in which you can consume this content and learn from a wide variety of players without it being this intense thing. And if you're being consistent with it in terms of away from the table, then when you start playing at the table with it, you'll actually be able to implement it. And that'll steadily improve and get better and better and better.
And I want to just go out a little further on that point. Like, there's lots of different ways to study. There's passive studying, watching videos, listening to podcasts, and then there's more active studying, like taking notes and working with solvers and Flopzilla and Equilab and stuff like that.
Yep.
And I think that what I really want to encourage people to do is don't be like me. I learned on my own. I
Yeah.
started, I didn't get involved with a group. I didn't get any coaching, and it took me forever to get good at poker. I mean, if you think I'm good at poker
Yeah.
now, anyway. But join a group like Learn Pro Poker, like Rec Poker, talk poker with your friends. A lot of people, you've got good friends, but your friends aren't into poker as much as you
Right.
are. That's why groups like ours are
Yeah, you need
here.
that community. Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, it's big. And I want to say again, if you're one of those players that you're like you know that you would benefit from coaching, but you're saying like, oh, I'm not good enough yet, I'm not experienced enough yet. I'll get coaching next year when I've brought my
Yeah.
game to the next level. It's a huge mistake because
Yeah.
getting coaching early, listen, yeah, it can be a little expensive. It's out of your pocket, but like it's less than one buy-in at one
Yeah,
three to get a
yeah,
couple
exactly.
sessions, and like you can accelerate the the
Yeah, for
the
sure.
the learning process. Is really, really valuable. If you think you're not good enough to get coaching, you're damn wrong. Get in there, give it a try, try a few different coaches, and give yourself that opportunity to get better faster so that you're at that better game level even faster, playing for more. It's definitely worth it. Please do consider it. Yeah.
For sure. The other thing I would say as well is that like learning while playing is a lot more expensive than paying for training
Yes.
site or any of those other things and learning in that way and then playing when once your game improves some. Of course, like at the end of the day, the other thing as well is, circling back to bankroll management, that type of stuff. So at the
Mm.
end of the day, if you're not managing your money properly, it doesn't really matter how well you're playing or how much you're studying or any of that stuff. So, while obviously I love the game, I love the industry, part of the reason why I really enjoy it is incredibly difficult and it is a very brutal, aggressive industry. So while obviously I, really want you to play and learn and grow and join us and join Rec Poker, I also really want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's financially responsible for
Mm.
yourself, for your family, and so you're not doing things in a way that can negatively impact you. I'm definitely a person of, yes, I love the game, I love the industry, but also buyer beware, be careful with your time, money, and effort. And if you do that type of stuff, poker is a wonderful industry to make friends and have community, and it's a wonderful game to learn and play.
Yeah. And listen, professionals have a bankroll. There's nothing wrong with being a recreational player and having a budget. If you like going to movies, you've got a budget to go to movies. If you like playing golf, you've got a budget to go play golf. I don't know
Exactly.
anyone who made a few buy-ins going to the movies last month, but
Yeah.
like, it's just one of the
Same
things
thing.
that makes this
Yeah,
game
for
great.
sure.
So, all right. Well,
All right. Well,
again, thank you to Ryan. This is such a treat. Taylor Moss, who puts all this stuff together, our Eric Jin, Ben Enslow, Scott Beckham, and Rob Washam are fantastic competitors. Everyone who competed in Rec Poker this year, and all our YouTube chatters who had a lot of fun. Now, listen, if you want to win your way in, we do 3 quarterly qualifying tournaments, one in June, one in September, and one in December. You can win a seat in next year's MaREC Madness to be competing with the Wrecking Crew. Again, just support your local food banks. And folks, that's all. We're out of here, gang. Thanks again. Have a fantastic week. See you next Tuesday. And stay frosty, folks. This was a real pleasure. Good night.